One lie could save your life, or end it. It. Elena never thought a lavish wedding would become a battlefield. One moment she was a guest trying to blend in, the next she was pretending to be engaged to a dangerous man she'd never met. Damien Valente. Cold, powerful, untouchable. His family ruled an empire built on fear, and their enemies wanted blood. When Elena overheard a murder plot targeting his father, she had a choice: stay silent and survive, or risk everything for a man who might destroy her anyway. Stay with me until the end, hit like, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The Villa Sant'Angelo sat on a hillside like a crown, all golden stone and terracotta tiles glowing in the late afternoon sun. Cypress trees lined the long driveway, their shadows cutting sharp lines across the gravel. Wedding guests moved in slow, elegant clusters across the grounds, women in silk and men in tailored suits that probably cost more than Elena Moretti made in 6 months. She stood near the garden fountain, clutching a glass of champagne she hadn't touched, trying to look like she belonged. She didn't. Her dress was borrowed, a simple navy thing her friend Sophia had insisted would be fine. It wasn't, not here, not among women wearing designer labels Elena couldn't even pronounce. She'd come to support Sophia, the bride's college roommate, who'd promised it would just be a small ceremony. Intimate, Sophia had said. Casual. Sophia was a liar. The wedding had over 300 guests. The ceremony alone had taken place in a private chapel with frescoed ceilings and stained glass that looked older than the country Elena's grandparents had left behind. The reception was being held in the villa's main courtyard, where tables dressed in cream linen surrounded a marble dance floor. Servers in white gloves moved between guests carrying trays of Prosecco and tiny, perfect appetizers that looked too beautiful to eat. Elena checked her phone. Still 2 hours before she could reasonably leave without offending Sophia. She could do this. She'd survived worse than feeling out of place at a rich person's party. "You look lost." Elena turned. A woman in her 50s stood beside her, elegant in pale yellow, her dark hair swept into a chignon. She had the kind of face that had aged well. Good bones, careful maintenance, the subtle work of someone who could afford the best surgeons. "I'm fine," Elena said. "Just taking it all in." "You're Sophia's friend, the teacher." It wasn't a question. Elena nodded anyway. "Elementary school, 3rd grade." "How sweet." The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Julia Valente, mother of the groom." Elena's stomach dropped. She'd avoided the receiving line, slipped into the chapel late, and left early, specifically to avoid this kind of interaction. "Congratulations. It's a beautiful wedding." "It cost enough." Julia's gaze moved over Elena's dress, her shoes, her lack of jewelry. Assessing, calculating. "You came alone?" "Yes." "No boyfriend? Husband?" "No." Julia's expression shifted into something Elena couldn't read. "How fortunate. I need your help with something." Before Elena could respond, Julia's hand closed around her wrist. Not hard, but firm enough that pulling away would cause a scene. The older woman guided her through the crowd, past tables and laughing guests, toward the villa's stone terrace where the wedding party was gathering for photos. "Mrs. Valente, I don't think. Call me Julia, and don't argue. Just smile and do exactly what I tell you." They stopped at the edge of the terrace. A photographer was arranging the bride and groom near a flowering arch, adjusting angles and checking light. The groom, Marco, Elena remembered, looked young and nervous in his tuxedo, his hand clasped tight in his bride's. They looked happy. Normal. There. Julia pointed across the terrace to a man standing alone near the balustrade, looking out over the valley below. Elena's breath caught. He was tall, maybe 6'2", built like someone who didn't need the gym to stay dangerous. Dark hair, dark suit that fit like it had been made specifically for his body. Even from 30 feet away, even with his back turned, he radiated something that made Elena want to step backward. Authority, threat, the kind of presence that didn't ask for attention but took it anyway. "My other son," Julia said. "Damien. I don't understand what—" "He needs a fiancé. You need to pretend to be her." Elena stared at her. "Excuse me?" Just for tonight, through the reception. A few hours at most. Julia's voice dropped lower, urgent. There are people here, business associates, who expect Damien to announce an engagement, a strategic alliance. But the arrangement fell through last week, and if they discover he's unattached, there will be consequences, dangerous ones. Then find someone else. There is no one else. Every woman here is either married, related to us, or already known to these people. You're perfect, unknown, unremarkable. Julia's fingers tightened on Elena's wrist. Please, I'm asking you to help my family avoid a catastrophe. Elena's mind raced. This was insane. She should walk away right now, make some excuse and get out of here before this bizarre situation got worse. But something in Julia's face stopped her. Fear. Real bone-deep fear barely hidden beneath the polished exterior. What kind of consequences? Elena asked quietly. The kind that end with people dead. The words hung in the air between them, flat and certain. Elena looked at the man on the terrace again, Damien, still standing with his back to them. She thought about the armed security she'd noticed at the gates, the way certain guests moved with the coiled readiness of bodyguards, the careful way people had spoken about the Valente family during the ceremony, voices lowered like they were discussing something fragile and dangerous. What do you want me to do? Relief flooded Julia's face. Act like you're in love with him. Stand close. Let him touch you. Laugh at his jokes. Make it believable. She released Elena's wrist, smoothing her dress. And whatever you do, don't ask questions about his work. Before Elena could change her mind, Julia was pulling her across the terrace. Guests parted automatically as they approached, some nodding respectfully at Julia, others watching Elena with open curiosity. The photographer called out something about waiting for golden hour. Music drifted from the courtyard below, strings and soft piano. They stopped behind Damien. Darling, Julia said, there's someone you need to meet. Damien turned slowly, and Elena forgot how to breathe. He was beautiful in the way a knife was beautiful. All clean lines and controlled danger. Sharp cheekbones, a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled, and eyes so dark they were almost black. His gaze moved over Elena with the same assessing quality his mother had used, but colder, more thorough, like he could see through her borrowed dress and nervous posture straight down to every secret she'd ever kept. This is Elena Moretti, Julia said brightly, as if introducing them at a garden party instead of recruiting Elena into whatever insane scheme this was. Your fiancé. Damien's expression didn't change. My what? Your fiancé. The woman you've been seeing for the past 6 months, the one you're madly in love with. Julia smiled like her jaw wasn't clenched. The Castellanos are watching from the East Terrace. Make it convincing. For 3 long seconds, nobody moved. Elena could hear her own heartbeat, loud and frantic against her ribs. This was the moment to walk away, to say no, this is crazy, find someone else. Then Damien's hand settled at the small of her back, warm even through the fabric of her dress, and pulled her against his side. Hello, darling, he said, his voice low and smooth and completely devoid of emotion. I've been looking everywhere for you. The endearment sounded like a threat. Elena forced herself to smile up at him, trying to look affectionate instead of terrified. Up close, he was even more overwhelming, taller than she'd realized, solid muscle beneath the expensive suit, and a jaw that could have been carved from marble. He smelled like cedar and something darker she couldn't name. Sorry, she managed. I got distracted by the gardens. Of course you did. His thumb moved in a small circle against her spine, a gesture that might have looked tender from a distance but felt like a brand. You've always loved flowers. Elena had no idea if she loved flowers. Her apartment had exactly 1 plant, and it was dying. They're beautiful. Not as beautiful as you. The words were perfect. The delivery was empty. Elena saw Julia relax slightly in her peripheral vision, apparently satisfied that they could pull this off. Across the terrace, Elena caught sight of a group of men in dark suits watching them intently. One of them, heavy-set, silver-haired, with the kind of face that had seen violence and caused more, raised his glass in a small salute. Damien raised his own glass in return, then bent his head toward Elena's ear. "Who the hell are you?" he murmured against her hair. "Nobody. Your mother grabbed me 5 minutes ago and told me to pretend we're engaged. And you agreed to lie to a room full of criminals because a stranger asked nicely? She said people would die if I didn't." She felt him exhale, a short breath that might have been frustration or amusement. She wasn't exaggerating. His hand slid higher on her back, fingers spreading possessively across her shoulder blade. "Can you act?" "I'm a teacher. I act enthusiastic about fractions every day." That got something from him. Not quite a smile, but a softening at the corner of his mouth. "Then act enthusiastic about me. We're being watched by people who kill for less than lying about an engagement." Elena's blood went cold. "You're serious?" "Completely." He pulled back to look at her, and his eyes had gone even harder. "What's your name?" "Elena." "Elena." He repeated it like he was testing how it felt in his mouth. "I'm Damien, and for the next few hours, you're mine. Understand?" It wasn't a question. It was a statement of temporary ownership, delivered with the casual certainty of someone used to being obeyed. Elena should have been outraged, should have pulled away, told him to go to hell, walked out of this nightmare before it got worse. Instead, she heard herself say, "I understand." Good girl. The praise was condescending and somehow made her stomach flip anyway. Before she could process that reaction, Damien was guiding her down the terrace steps toward the reception courtyard, his hand never leaving her back. Guests turned to watch them pass, whispers following in their wake. Elena caught fragments. Didn't know Damien was engaged. Who is she? Julia never mentioned. "Ignore them," Damien said quietly. "Just stay close to me and smile." They reached their assigned table, the family table, naturally, right beside the dance floor. Marco and his bride were already seated, along with an older man Elena assumed was Damien's father and several other relatives. Everyone looked expensive and vaguely dangerous. Marco's bride, Alicia, offered Elena a warm smile that felt genuine at least. "You must be Elena. Sophia mentioned you might come. I'm so glad you made it." "Thank you for having me," Elena said, settling into the chair Damien pulled out for her. "Congratulations." "Isn't it wonderful?" Alessia practically glowed. "A perfect day. And now that you're here, Damien finally looks happy." Damien made a non-committal sound and reached for his wine glass. His father, silver-haired, barrel-chested, with the same dark eyes as his son's, leaned forward. "So this is the girl who's finally tamed my wild son." His voice carried the gravel of too many cigars. "Julia said you were special, but she didn't mention you were beautiful." "Thank you, Mr. Valente." "Call me Antonio." He studied her with unnerving intensity. "What is it you do, Elena?" "I teach 3rd grade." Antonio's eyebrows rose. "A teacher? How wholesome, Hoots." He glanced at Damien. "Interesting choice, son." "I have excellent taste," Damien said flatly. "Clearly." Antonio's smile didn't reach his eyes. "And how did you two meet?" Elena's mind went blank. She had no backstory, no prepared lies, no idea what she was supposed to. "A coffee shop," Damien said smoothly, his hand finding Elena's under the table and squeezing once in warning. 6 months ago. She was reading Dante and I couldn't resist." "Dante," Antonio repeated. "The Inferno?" "Paradiso," Elena said, picking up the thread. It was the only Dante she'd actually read. "I wanted to balance things out." Damien's grip on her hand tightened slightly. Approval or surprise, she couldn't tell. "I told her only someone optimistic enough to read about paradise would be crazy enough to date me." "And she stayed anyway," Julia added, appearing beside the table with fresh champagne. "True love conquers all." Antonio laughed, a rough bark of sound. Or true stupidity. Either way, welcome to the family, Elena. The servers appeared with the first course, something involving scallops and microgreens that Elena barely tasted. She was too aware of Damien beside her, his thigh pressed against hers under the table, his hand occasionally touching her shoulder or arm in casual displays of affection that felt like carefully choreographed movements. Every touch was purposeful, strategic, meant to be seen. Across the courtyard, the silver-haired man she'd noticed earlier was still watching them. He sat with a group that didn't match the wedding's elegant atmosphere. Harder faces, cheaper suits, the kind of men who looked like they settled disputes with fists instead of lawyers. "Who is that?" Elena whispered to Damien during a lull in conversation. "Carlo Castellano, head of a rival family." Damien's voice was barely audible. The engagement I was supposed to announce was to his daughter. When it fell through, he took it as an insult. What happened to her? She chose someone else. Someone not me. His jaw tightened. Carlo sees it as a broken contract, a show of disrespect. And if he finds out I'm not really your fiancé, then he'll know my family is weak, vulnerable, and he'll move against us before the night is over. Damien turned to look at her, his face close enough that anyone watching would think they were sharing an intimate moment. So you see, Elena, you're not just playing a role, you're preventing a war. The weight of that settled over her like a physical thing. She wasn't just helping a family avoid embarrassment. She was standing between two criminal empires on the edge of violence, pretending to be something she wasn't to maintain a balance she didn't understand. "I shouldn't be here," she said. "No," Damien agreed. "You shouldn't, but you are. And now we both have to live with it." Dinner continued with multiple courses and too many wine pairings. Elena tried to keep up with the conversation flowing around her. Business talk disguised as small talk, careful references to territories and arrangements that sounded innocent but clearly weren't. Alessia chattered about the honeymoon they had planned in Positano. Marco looked increasingly drunk and happy. Antonio held court at the head of the table, telling stories about old Italy that sounded more like confessions than memories. And through it all, Damien played his part flawlessly. He touched Elena constantly, a hand on her knee, fingers brushing her wrist, his palm warm against the small of her back when they stood for the toasts. He laughed at her awkward attempts at jokes. He leaned close to whisper things that meant nothing but looked intimate. He was, Elena realized, a devastatingly good actor. She wondered what he was like when he wasn't pretending. "Dance with me," Damien said as the servers cleared the dessert plates. It wasn't a request. He was already standing, offering his hand. The band had started playing something slow and romantic. Other couples were moving toward the dance floor, a schwabel. Marco and Alessia first, then Antonio with Julia, then others following. Elena let Damien pull her into the crowd of dancers. His hand settled at her waist, the other capturing her fingers, and suddenly they were moving together to music she barely heard over her own pulse. "You're trembling," he said. "I'm scared." "Good. Fear keeps you alert." He spun her gently, bringing her closer. "But don't let them see it." "How do you do this?" Elena asked. "How do you just turn it on and off? The act?" "Practice." His thumb traced a small circle on her lower back. "I've been lying about who I am my entire life. You learn to compartmentalize. That sounds lonely." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. "It is." They danced in silence for a moment. Elena was intensely aware of how closely they were pressed together, how solid he felt against her, how his hand had splayed across her spine like he was claiming territory. This close, she could see the faint scar along his jawline, the shadow of exhaustion under his eyes, the tiny details that made him human instead of just dangerous. "Why did the engagement really fall through?" she asked quietly. "The one with Castellano's daughter. Because I told her the truth about what marrying me would mean, the violence, the compromises, the cage." His voice dropped lower. "She was smart enough to choose freedom instead." "But you can't." "No, I was born into this. I'll die in it too. Probably sooner than later." "That's grim. That's reality." He turned her again, positioning them so his back was to the Castellano table. "Stop looking so sad. We're supposed to be in love, remember?" Elena forced a smile. "How's this?" "Terrible. You look like you're being held hostage." "I am being held hostage." "Fair point." Almost against his will, his mouth curved slightly. "Try thinking about something that actually makes you happy." Like what? I don't know. Fractions? Elena surprised herself by laughing. A real, genuine laugh that bubbled up before she could stop it. Damien's expression shifted into something she couldn't read, his eyes searching her face like he was seeing her for the first time. There, he said softly. That's better. The song ended. Another started. Damien didn't let her go. They kept dancing, circling slowly under lights that had been strung across the courtyard, and Elena felt herself relaxing despite everything. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the strange intimacy of being held by someone who was simultaneously protecting her and using her. I need to use the restroom, she said eventually. Damien hesitated, then nodded. Second floor, east wing. I'll wait here. Elena slipped away from the dance floor, grateful for a moment alone to catch her breath and process what the hell she'd gotten herself into. The villa's interior was cooler than the courtyard, all marble floors and oil paintings of serious-looking ancestors. She found the bathroom easily enough. More marble, gold fixtures, hand towels that were probably worth more than her car. She splashed cold water on her wrists, staring at her reflection. Her cheeks were flushed from dancing and wine. Her hair had started to come loose from its clip. She looked like someone who'd been thoroughly kissed, even though Damien's mouth hadn't come anywhere near hers. Yet. Elena shook that thought away and headed back into the hallway. She was still a floor above the reception, the sound of music and laughter drifting up from below. She should go straight back to Damien. Stay close like he'd told her. Then she heard voices, male voices, low and urgent, coming from a room down the hall. The door was cracked open just enough for sound to carry. Elena knew she should keep walking. Mind her business. Get back to the relative safety of Damien's protective presence. Instead, she moved closer. During the toast, someone was saying, when everyone's focused on Marco and Alessia, Antonio will be standing, exposed. It'll look like a heart attack. And Damien? A second voice, rougher. Damien will be dealt with after. Without Antonio, he's just a man. He can be eliminated quietly. Elena's blood turned to ice. You're sure about this? The first voice again. Betraying Antonio? Antonio is weak. He's been moving us toward legitimacy, washing money clean, trying to go respectable. Carlo offers real power, real expansion. This is the right move. And if we're caught? We won't be. Half the family wants Antonio gone anyway. They're tired of his soft approach. After tonight, the Valentes will belong to Carlo Castellano, and we'll be rewarded for our loyalty. Elena's hands had gone numb. She was listening to a murder plot. An assassination plan for tonight during the wedding, with a traitor inside the Valente family working alongside their rival. She needed to tell someone. Warn Damien. Get help. She started to back away from the door and stepped directly into someone's path. Well, well. The voice was amused, male, unfamiliar. What do we have here? Elena turned. A man in a server's uniform stood in the hallway, but his eyes were too hard for someone carrying appetizers. Recognition flashed across his face. He'd seen her with Damien. He knew she'd heard. I was just looking for the bathroom, Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. Sure you were. He moved closer. And what did you hear, pretty girl? Nothing. I don't... His hand shot out, grabbing her arm hard enough to bruise. Don't lie. I saw you listening. Elena's training from the single self-defense class she'd taken kicked in. She drove her knee up hard between his legs, and when he doubled over with a grunt of pain, she ran. She didn't think, didn't plan, just moved on pure instinct, her heels clicking against marble as she sprinted toward the stairs. Behind her, she heard him recovering, shouting something. Footsteps pounding after her. Elena hit the main staircase and nearly collided with a guest coming up. She pushed past, stumbling on the steps, catching herself on the railing. The reception courtyard was below, full of people and noise and light. Safety. She just had to reach. A hand caught her wrist, spinning her around. The fake server had caught up. His face was twisted with rage, and she saw the outline of a gun under his jacket. You stupid... Let her go! The voice came from behind Elena, cold as winter. She didn't need to turn around to know it was Damien. The fake server's eyes widened. His grip on Elena loosened just enough for her to wrench free and stumble backward into Damien's chest. His arm came around her immediately, pulling her behind him in one smooth motion. She heard nothing, the man said quickly. Just got lost. You put your hands on her, Damien said quietly. On my fiancée. I didn't know us. Get out of my sight, now, before I forget we're at my brother's wedding. The threat in those words was unmistakable. The fake server backed away, hands raised, then turned and disappeared down a side hallway. Elena was shaking, adrenaline crashing through her system in sick waves. What happened? Damien turned her around, his hands on her shoulders, eyes scanning her face. Did he hurt you? No, I mean, he grabbed me, but I... Elena's words tumbled over each other. Damien, there's a plan. To kill your father. Tonight, during the toast. Someone in your family is working with Carlo Castellano. They're going to make it look like a heart attack, but it's murder. They said after they kill Antonio, they'll come for you next, and... Slow down. His grip tightened. You heard this? Where? Upstairs. 2 men in a room. I didn't see their faces, but one of them is pretending to be a server, and the other one, details. Everything you heard exactly. Elena forced herself to breathe, to think clearly. She repeated the conversation as precisely as she could remember, watching Damien's face turn to stone with every word. When she finished, his jaw was so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. Stay with me, he said. Don't leave my side for the rest of the night. Understood? What are you going to do? Prevent a murder. He took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers, and find out which of my relatives is a traitor. They descended the stairs together, back into the warm glow of the reception. The band was still playing. Guests were still laughing, dancing, drinking champagne that sparkled in crystal glasses. The happy couple was cutting their cake, Alessia's hand guided by Marco's as they made the first slice together. Everything looked perfect. Everything was about to become a bloodbath. Damien pulled Elena close as they moved through the crowd, his mouth near her ear. The toast will happen after the cake. Maybe 20 minutes. I need to warn my father without tipping off whoever's planning this. How? I don't know yet. His voice was tight with controlled fury. But if you hadn't overheard them, I know. They reached the family table. Antonio was there, pouring himself another glass of wine and telling a story that had Julia laughing. He looked happy, relaxed, completely unaware that someone in this room wanted him dead. Father, Damien said, his tone carefully neutral. Can I speak with you, privately? Antonio waved him off. Later, son. I'm enjoying the party. It's important. So is my youngest son's wedding. Antonio raised his glass. Whatever business you have can wait until tomorrow. Damien's hand tightened on Elena's. She could feel the frustration radiating off him, the dangerous energy barely contained. He couldn't push harder without arousing suspicion. Couldn't pull his father aside without potentially alerting the traitor that something was wrong. They were trapped in a countdown to murder with no clear way to stop it. Dance with me again, Elena said suddenly, loud enough for the table to hear. Please? This is my favorite song. It wasn't. She didn't even know what song was playing. But Damien understood immediately, following her lead back to the dance floor where they could talk without being overheard. We can't wait for him to listen, Elena said as soon as they were moving together. We have to do something now. Like what? Start a panic? Get people killed in the crossfire? No, but maybe. Elena's mind raced. The lights. If we cut the lights before the toast, the shooter won't have a clear target. The backup generator would kick in within seconds. Seconds might be enough. Enough to disrupt the plan. Make them abort. Damien stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You want to sabotage my brother's wedding reception. I want to save your father's life. For a long moment he didn't respond. Then, slowly, he nodded. The breaker box is in the basement, service entrance through the kitchen. Can you get there without being noticed? Yes, but you're not coming with me. Damien, no. His voice left no room for argument. You stay here, visible. If I disappear and you disappear, people will ask questions. You need to be seen, dancing, smiling, playing the role. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to stay with him, but he was right. She nodded reluctantly. Be careful. Always. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, quick, warm, startling in its tenderness, then released her. Count to 30, then find Alicia. Ask her about the honeymoon. Keep the conversation going. Don't look for me. He slipped away into the crowd before she could respond. Elena counted silently, her heart hammering, then made her way to where the bride was holding court with a group of guests. Alessia lit up when she saw her. Elena, are you having fun? Isn't Damien wonderful? He's something, Elena managed. Tell me about Positano. I've always wanted to go. Alessia launched into an enthusiastic description of the hotel they'd booked, the restaurants they planned to visit, the boat tour Marco had arranged. Elena nodded and smiled and tried not to watch the time. Tried not to think about Damien alone in a basement, sabotaging electrical systems to prevent an assassination. The cake was finished. Servers were bringing out champagne for the toast. Elena saw Antonio standing, preparing to speak, glass in hand. No sign of Damien. No sign of anyone suspicious. Where was he? Antonio tapped his glass for attention. The music stopped. Guests turned to listen, smiling in anticipation of the traditional father's blessing for the new couple. My friends, my family, Antonio began, his voice carrying across the courtyard. Tonight we celebrate love, the joining of two families, two hearts. Elena scanned the crowd desperately. There, movement near the back. A man in a server's uniform, hand inside his jacket. The same man who'd grabbed her upstairs. Her breath stopped. And I want to thank all of you for being here to witness this beautiful moment in my son's life. The man's hand emerged from his jacket. Metal glinted in the fairy lights. A gun. Elena's body moved before her brain caught up. She opened her mouth and screamed, raw, piercing, cutting through Antonio's words and the polite quiet of the gathered guests. Gun! Everything happened at once. The courtyard exploded into chaos. Guests screamed, dove for cover, knocked over tables in their panic. Antonio's security rushed forward, hands going for weapons. The man with the gun swung toward Elena, his face twisted in fury, and the lights went out. Complete darkness swallowed the villa. Gunshots cracked through the night. 1, 2, 3. Muzzle flashes like lightning in the pitch black. Elena hit the ground hard, her palms scraping against stone. Around her, people were shouting, crying, scrambling in the dark. Then she felt hands on her shoulders, pulling her up, and she knew without seeing that it was Damien. Stay down, he hissed in her ear. Don't move. I saw him. The man from upstairs. He had a gun. I know. More gunfire. Elena heard a body hit the ground somewhere close. Heard someone screaming orders in Italian. The backup generator kicked in and emergency lights flickered to life, casting everything in sickly yellow. The scene was carnage. Tables overturned, champagne pooling on the stone. Alessia was being shielded by Marco and two bodyguards. Antonio stood near the head table, alive and furious, surrounded by armed men. The fake server was on the ground, bleeding from his shoulder, gun kicked away and 3 men holding him down. But someone else was missing from the chaos. Carlo Castellano's table was empty. He and his men were gone, slipped away in the darkness. They ran, Damien said, following Elena's gaze. He stood slowly, pulling her up with him. The cowards ran. Is your father... He's alive. Damien's voice was flat. Thanks to you. Antonio was striding toward them now, his face dark with rage. Someone better explain to me what the hell just happened. We stopped an assassination, Damien said calmly. Elena overheard the plot. The shooter is one of ours. Check his credentials. I'm guessing he's on Carlo's payroll now. Carlo himself ran the moment she screamed. He knew the plan had failed. Antonio's eyes swung to Elena. You knew about this? I heard them planning it, she said, her voice shaking. Upstairs. They said during the toast when you were standing. They wanted to make it look natural, but it was murder. They said, which one of my people betrayed me? Antonio's voice could have cut glass. I don't know. I didn't see his face, just heard his voice.
Damien's jaw tightened. We'll find him. Everyone who was upstairs before the toast, we interrogate them all. Someone talked.
Someone planned this.
Do it.
Antonio's gaze moved between Damien and Elena.
And you, Elena, is it?
You saved my life tonight. I did what anyone would do.
No.
Antonio stepped closer. You risked your life to warn us. You didn't have to do that. You could have stayed silent, safe. His expression softened fractionally. My family owes you a debt. Elena didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to explain that she hadn't been thinking about debts or favors or gratitude. She'd just seen danger and screamed. That's all. Julia appeared beside them, her face pale. The police are on their way. Guests are leaving. What do we tell them? Tell them the truth, Antonio said grimly. That someone tried to kill me at my son's wedding and failed. Let them know the Valentes don't die easy. The next hour passed in a blur. Police arrived, took statements, removed the wounded shooter. Guests fled in expensive cars, their elegant clothes disheveled, their shock giving way to fear. The wedding was over. The fairy tale ruined. Blood and broken glass where there should have been champagne toasts and dancing. Elena sat on the terrace steps, exhausted and shaking with delayed reaction. Damien found her there eventually, jacket gone, shirt partially unbuttoned, looking as tired as she felt. You should go home, he said, sitting beside her. This isn't your fight. I'm already part of it. The second I screamed, I chose a side. You didn't choose anything. You were dragged into this. Maybe. Elena looked at him. But I stayed. I helped. Her voice cracked. Is this what your life is like? Always? More or less. How do you stand it? I don't think about it too much. He reached over, taking her hand in his. His palm was warm, calloused. You were brave tonight, stupid but brave. You're welcome. That got a ghost of a smile from him. Thank you for saving my father, for not running when you had the chance. Where would I have gone? They knew I heard. That fake server would have... Elena cut herself off, not wanting to finish that thought. He would have killed you, Damien said flatly. If I hadn't found you when I did, he would have put a bullet in you and dumped your body somewhere it wouldn't be found for weeks. The casual certainty in his voice made Elena's stomach turn. That's comforting. It's the truth. His fingers tightened on hers. Which is why you can't go home tonight. Not until we've secured the situation. Not until we know who the traitor is and whether Carlo has more people planted in our organization. So what am I supposed to do? Stay here. With me. Damien stood, pulling her to her feet. At least for tonight. Maybe longer. Until it's safe. Elena should have argued. Should have insisted on going back to her own life. Her own apartment. Her own comfortable distance from violence and danger, and men who talked about murder like other people discussed the weather. Instead, she let him lead her inside the villa, through halls that had gone quiet now, past rooms where bodyguards stood watch and broken glass still littered the floors. He took her to a bedroom in the east wing, large, elegantly furnished, with windows overlooking the dark valley below. You'll be safe here, Damien said. There are guards on this floor. No one gets in without going through them first. What about you? I have work to do. Finding the traitor. Making sure my father is protected. He paused in the doorway, looking back at her. Get some rest, Elena. Tomorrow we deal with the fallout. He was gone before she could respond, leaving her alone in a stranger's room in a house full of criminals, wearing a borrowed dress and carrying scars from violence she'd never imagined being part of. Elena sat on the edge of the bed and finally let herself cry. Quiet, exhausted tears for the normal life she'd left behind the moment she'd agreed to Julia's desperate request, for the man she'd danced with who felt dangerous and protective in equal measure, for the line she'd crossed by screaming that warning, choosing Damien's family over her own safety. She'd thought this would be just one night, a few hours of pretending and then back to her regular life. But looking at the bloodstains on her borrowed dress and feeling the ghost of Damien's touch still warm on her skin, Elena knew with sickening certainty that nothing would ever be regular again. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows
and the distant sound of men's voices arguing in Italian. For a disoriented moment, she thought she was still dreaming. Then the events of the previous night crashed back. The wedding, the fake engagement, the gunshots in the dark. And she sat up too fast, her head spinning. The bedroom door opened without warning. Elena grabbed the blanket, pulling it up to her chin, but it was just a woman in a crisp black uniform carrying a tray. "Breakfast," the woman said in accented English. "Mr. Valente said you would be hungry." "Which Mr. Valente?" "Damien." The woman set the tray on the bedside table. Coffee, fruit, pastries that smelled like butter and heaven. "He's been awake all night. Interrogations." Elena's stomach turned. She didn't want to think about what those interrogations might have involved. "Thank you." The woman nodded and left, closing the door quietly behind her. Elena picked at the food without tasting it, her mind cycling through everything that had happened. She needed to go home. Back to her apartment, her classroom, her normal life, where the biggest crisis was a parent-teacher conference gone wrong. But when she tried the bedroom door, it was locked from the outside. Panic flared hot in her chest. She was trapped. A prisoner in a house full of criminals who probably saw her as a witness to be managed or a liability to be eliminated. Elena pressed her ear to the door, listening for guards, trying to calculate whether screaming would help or just make things worse. Then she heard footsteps, and the lock clicked open. Damien stood in the hallway, still wearing yesterday's shirt, now wrinkled and stained with something dark that might have been blood. His face was drawn, exhaustion carved into every line, but his eyes were sharp. "You locked me in," Elena said, "for your protection." "That's what kidnappers say." "I'm not kidnapping you." He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "But I can't let you leave yet. Not until we're certain it's safe. It's been hours. I have work tomorrow. A life. People who'll notice I'm missing." "I know." Damien ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. "And I'm sorry. But Carlo Castellano is still out there, and he knows you can identify the shooter. He knows you heard the plot. As long as he's a threat, you're in danger." "So what am I supposed to do? Live here forever?" "No, just until we neutralize the situation." He moved to the window, looking out over the valley. Morning light made him look younger, more human. "We found the traitor, my father's cousin, Enzo. He'd been taking payments from Carlo for months, feeding him information about our operations." Elena sat down on the edge of the bed. "What happened to him?" "You don't want to know." "You killed him." Damien turned to face her. "My father did, personally. That's how these things work." The casual way he said it made Elena's skin crawl. "And the shooter? He'll live. Unfortunately for him." Damien's expression hardened. "He's giving us everything he knows about Carlo's network, names, locations, plans. By the end of the week, Carlo won't have an organization left to run." "That's still days away. I can't stay here for days." "You can and you will." He crossed to where she sat, crouching down so they were eye level. "Elena, listen to me. Carlo doesn't forgive and he doesn't forget. You humiliated him last night, made him run like a coward in front of his own men. He'll want revenge, and the easiest target is you. Then give me protection, bodyguards, whatever you people use. I am giving you protection, me." His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. The gesture was tender in a way that didn't match his words. "You're safer here than anywhere else." Elena wanted to pull away but couldn't make herself move. His touch was warm, grounding, and some broken part of her that had been terrified all night wanted to lean into it. "This isn't my world." "I know, but you're in it now whether you want to be or not." He stood, putting distance between them. "There are clothes in the closet. They should fit. Come downstairs when you're ready. My father wants to speak with you." He left before she could argue, locking the door again. Elena sat in the too quiet room, feeling the walls close in. She should be panicking, should be demanding a lawyer or the police or something. But the police had been here last night, had taken statements and left, and nobody seemed concerned that she was being held against her will in a criminal's house. "Because maybe," a small voice whispered, "you're not really against your will. Maybe you could have run last night and didn't. Maybe you're still here because some reckless part of you wants to be." Elena shoved that thought away and went to the closet. The woman had been right. There were clothes, designer labels, and expensive fabrics, all in her size. She chose the most conservative option, a simple black dress that could pass for mourning or business depending on how you looked at it, and got ready with toiletries that had been left on the bathroom counter. 20 minutes later, a different guard unlocked her door and gestured for her to follow. He led her through the villa's halls, past rooms where men in suits talked in low voices, past windows that showed the grounds crawling with additional security. They'd turned the elegant wedding venue into a fortress overnight. Antonio Valente was waiting in a study that smelled like leather and old cigars. He stood when Elena entered, waving away the guard. "Sit, please," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his massive desk. "Coffee? Something stronger?" "Coffee's fine." He poured from a silver service, handed her a delicate cup that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "You slept well, I hope." "As well as anyone who's being held prisoner." Antonio's eyebrows rose. "Is that what you think this is?" "What else would you call it?" "I can't leave." The door was locked. "For your safety, not to keep you captive." He settled into his own chair, studying her over the rim of his cup. "Though I understand the distinction might feel academic from your perspective." "Mr. Valente." "Antonio." "Antonio," Elena corrected. "I appreciate that you think I'm in danger, but I have a life, responsibilities. I can't just disappear." "We've already handled it. Called your school, said you had a family emergency, and would be taking the week off. Called your landlord, paid your rent through next month. Your neighbor is feeding your cat." Elena's blood went cold. "I don't have a cat." "Then she's feeding something." Antonio smiled slightly. "The point is, we've made arrangements. You don't need to worry about the practical matters. You can't just take over my life." "I can, actually, and I have, because you saved mine." He set down his cup, leaning forward. "Do you understand what that means in my world, Elena? A life debt isn't a casual thing. You didn't have to warn us. You could have stayed silent, kept yourself safe. But you risked everything to give us a chance to fight back. That kind of loyalty deserves to be repaid." "I don't want anything from you." "Too bad. You have it anyway." Antonio's expression hardened. "And more than that, you have my gratitude, which is why I'm going to be honest with you about something Damien probably hasn't mentioned." Elena's hands tightened on her cup. "What?" "The engagement. It can't end. Not yet." "What are you talking about? It was fake, just for one night." It was. But now the whole world knows about it. Every newspaper in the region ran the story this morning. Damien Valente's mysterious fiancée saves the Valente patriarch from assassination. Your face is on the front page. Your name is in print. You're part of this family now, whether we like it or not. Elena felt the room tilt. No. No, that's not... I didn't agree to that." "You didn't have to agree. It happened." Antonio pulled a tablet from his desk drawer, turned it to face her. The headline was in Italian, but the photo was clear enough. Elena and Damien on the dance floor, his hand on her waist, her face tilted up toward his. They looked like lovers, like the real thing. "If we announce now that it was fake," Antonio continued, "it makes us look weak, desperate, like we had to manufacture a fiancé for Damien because no real woman would have him. More than that, it puts you at even greater risk. If Carlo thinks you were just a convenient actress, you're worthless. But if he believes you're actually going to marry into the family, killing you becomes an attack on us. A declaration of war he's not ready for." Elena's mind was racing. "So you want me to keep pretending?" "For a while. Until the heat dies down. Until Carlo is neutralized." Antonio's voice softened. "I know it's not what you signed up for, but you're already in this, Elena. The safest way out is through. And if I refuse, then you'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, waiting for Carlo to send someone after you. Is that what you want?" No, it wasn't. But she didn't want this either, trapped in a lie that kept growing, tied to a man she barely knew, playing a role in a world that terrified her. Elena thought about her classroom, her students, the simple rhythms of a life that suddenly felt impossibly far away. How long? She asked quietly.
A month, maybe 2. Long enough for it to look natural when you and Damien break up, amicably. Long enough for other news to push you off the front pages. And in the meantime, you'll stay here, or at one of our other properties. You'll be seen with Damien regularly. You'll play the part. Antonio paused. And you'll be compensated, generously, whatever you need to make this bearable. Elena wanted to throw the money back in his face, wanted to tell him she wasn't for sale, that he couldn't just buy her cooperation like he bought everything else. But she was also practical enough to know that refusing wouldn't change anything. She was already trapped, might as well get something out of it. I want my own space, she said. Not locked in a bedroom like a prisoner, and I want to be able to call my friends. Let them know I'm okay. Done. And when this is over, when the engagement ends, I want a clean break. No more contact with your family. No more favors or debts or whatever you people call it. Antonio's smile was thin. That might be harder to arrange. Once you're in this world, it's difficult to get out. Then you'll have to make it easy, because I'm not staying longer than necessary. Fair enough. He stood, extending his hand. Do we have an agreement? Elena looked at his outstretched hand. Shaking it would seal the deal, commit her to weeks more of this nightmare. But refusing wouldn't change the reality that she was already committed, already tangled in their world, whether she wanted to be or not. She shook his hand. His grip was firm, certain. Welcome to the family, Antonio said, officially this time. The study door opened and Damien walked in, showered and changed, looking more like himself. His gaze went immediately to Elena, checking her face for signs of distress. Everything settled? He asked his father. We've reached an understanding. Antonio moved toward the door. I'll leave you two alone. You should discuss the arrangements. He left, and suddenly the room felt smaller with just Elena and Damien in it. Damien closed the door, leaning against it. You didn't have to agree, he said. Your father made it pretty clear I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. Not when all the options are terrible. Elena stood, needing to move, to do something with the nervous energy flooding her system. So what now? We just pretend to date for the next month? More or less. Public appearances, dinners. You'll need to move into my apartment downtown. It'll look strange if my fiancé lives separately. Your apartment. It has 3 bedrooms. You'll have your own space. Damien pushed off the door, moving closer. And I'm not there much anyway. Work keeps me busy. What work exactly? Your father mentioned legitimacy, but you're still criminals. We're businessmen who occasionally operate outside the law. His mouth curved slightly. There's a difference. Is there? To me, yes. He stopped a few feet away, maintaining careful distance. Most of what we do now is legal. Import, export, real estate, investments. The illegal parts are legacy operations. Things my grandfather started that are difficult to untangle. Like what? You really want to know? Elena thought about it. Did she want the details of what the Valente family did in the shadows? Did she want to know exactly what kind of man she was pretending to love? No, she admitted. Probably better if I don't. Probably. Damien's expression softened. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. About all of this. You deserved better than to get dragged into our mess. Little late for apologies. I know, but I mean it anyway. He reached out, then caught himself, hand falling back to his side. I'll try to make this as painless as possible, and when it's over, I'll make sure you're protected. Set up somewhere safe where Carlo can't reach you. Your father said once you're in this world, it's hard to get out. It is, but I'll find a way. His voice dropped lower, almost gentle. You saved my father's life, Elena. Whatever else happens, I won't forget that. The sincerity in his words caught her off guard. She'd been bracing for manipulation or demands, not this quiet promise of protection. It made him feel dangerous in a different way, not because he might hurt her, but because she might start believing he actually cared. When do we leave? She asked, changing the subject. Tonight, after dinner with the family. My mother wants to get to know her future daughter-in-law better. Of course she does. It won't be that bad. Just smile and let her talk. She likes feeling in control of things. Dinner turned out to be an understatement. Julia had organized what she called an intimate family meal, which apparently meant 20 people crowded around a table that could have seated 40, with more courses than Elena could count. She was placed beside Damien, across from Marco and Alessia, who looked tired but happy despite the chaos of their wedding night. "I'm so sorry about yesterday," Alessia said quietly, reaching across the table to squeeze Elena's hand. "What a terrible way to start your engagement celebration." "It's fine. I'm just glad everyone's okay." "Thanks to you." Marco raised his wine glass. "To Elena, the bravest woman in the room." Others echoed the toast, glasses clinking, voices warm with approval. Elena felt Damien's hand settle on her thigh under the table, a gentle pressure that might have been comfort or warning. "Tell us how you really met," Julia said from the head of the table. "The coffee shop story is charming, but I want details. What made you fall for my difficult son?" Elena's mind went blank. She and Damien hadn't discussed a more elaborate backstory. She had no idea what to say that wouldn't contradict whatever lies he'd already told. "He was persistent," she said carefully. "I tried to ignore him at first." "Smart girl," someone down the table called out, getting laughs. "But he kept coming back. Same coffee shop, same time every morning. Eventually, I got curious enough to actually talk to him." Elena was making this up as she went, hoping it sounded plausible. "He wasn't what I expected." "What did you expect?" Julia asked. Elena glanced at Damien. "Someone colder, more untouchable. But when we actually talked, he was different, real. It wasn't entirely a lie. Last night, in the moments between the danger, she'd glimpsed something human in him, something that didn't quite match the dangerous exterior." Damien's hand tightened on her thigh. "She made me work for it," he said smoothly. "Turned me down 3 times before she agreed to an actual date." 4 times, Elena corrected without thinking. 4 times. His smile was slight but genuine. "She has high standards." The conversation moved on to other topics. Business deals Elena didn't understand, family gossip about people she'd never met, plans for upcoming events she'd apparently be expected to attend. She smiled and nodded and tried not to think about how easily the lies were coming now, how natural it felt to sit beside Damien and play this role. After dinner, Damien's driver took them to the city. The apartment was in a building that looked like it cost more than Elena would make in 10 lifetimes. Marble lobby, doorman who greeted Damien by name, an elevator that required a key just to access the penthouse floor. "This is where you live?" Elena asked as the elevator rose. "When I'm not at the villa. It's more convenient for work." The elevator opened directly into the apartment. Elena stepped out and tried not to stare. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, lights spreading out like stars. The furniture was modern and expensive, all clean lines and muted colors. Art on the walls that looked like it belonged in a museum. "Your room is down that hall," Damien said, pointing. "Second door, bathrooms attached. You should have everything you need, but if not, let me know." Elena walked down the hall, opened the door he'd indicated. The bedroom was larger than her entire apartment, with a bed that could sleep 4 in its own sitting area. Her things were already there, man. Someone had packed her clothes from home, arranged her toiletries in the bathroom. The invasion of privacy should have made her angry. Instead, she just felt tired. Too tired to fight anymore. She found Damien in the kitchen, pouring whiskey into 2 glasses. "I didn't ask," he started. "I'll take one." He handed her a glass. The whiskey burned going down, sharp and warm. Elena leaned against the counter, looking at this man who was supposed to be her fiancé, trying to figure out who he actually was beneath the careful control. "Can I ask you something, Mishit?" she said. "Probably won't stop you either way." "Why aren't you married already? You're what, 32? 33? Your father seems eager to marry you off. What happened?" Damien was quiet for a long moment. "I was engaged once. Really engaged, not a performance. Her name was Sophia." "What happened?" "She figured out what my life would be like. The danger, the violence, the constant looking over your shoulder. She decided she wanted something different." He drained his glass. "Can't say I blame her.
Do you miss her? Sometimes. Mostly I miss the idea of her, the possibility of a normal life. He looked at Elena. What about you? No boyfriend wondering where you disappeared to? No, I dated someone for a while, but he wanted things I couldn't give him. Marriage, kids, the whole picture. I wasn't ready. Are you now? Ready for marriage and kids? No, definitely not. Good, because this fake engagement is complicated enough without real feelings getting involved. The words should have been reassuring. Instead, they felt like a warning. Don't get attached. Don't mistake performance for reality. Don't forget this is temporary. I should sleep, Elena said. It's been a long day. Elena. Damien's voice stopped her at the hallway. Thank you for agreeing to this. I know it's not what you wanted. None of this is what I wanted. I know, but you're handling it better than most people would. She wanted to ask what would happen if she wasn't handling it, if she broke down or ran or refused to keep playing along. But she was afraid of the answer, so she just nodded and went to her borrowed room in this borrowed life. The next few days fell into a strange routine. Damien left early for work, whatever that actually meant, and returned late. Elena spent her days exploring the apartment, reading books from his extensive library, trying not to think about her real life gathering dust back home. They had dinner together most nights, stilted conversations over takeout, or meals prepared by a cook who appeared and vanished like a ghost. And slowly, carefully, they started learning each other. Elena discovered that Damien took his coffee black, that he had a scar on his left shoulder from a knife fight when he was 17, that he played piano when he was stressed, but only when he thought no one was listening, that he was fluent in 4 languages and had never finished college because his father had pulled him into the family business instead. Damien learned that Elena had wanted to be a writer before she became a teacher, that she was allergic to shellfish, that she alphabetized her books and folded her clothes in a specific way that bordered on obsessive, that she'd grown up poor and worked 2 jobs to put herself through college, that her parents were dead and she had no siblings, that she was more alone in the world than she liked to admit. They were facts. Just information exchanged between 2 people forced to share space. It didn't mean anything. At least that's what Elena told herself. On the 4th night, Damien came home earlier than usual and found her on the couch with a book. We have an event tomorrow, he said without preamble. Charity gala. Very public, lots of cameras. My mother already sent over a dress. Elena marked her page. What kind of charity? Children's Hospital. My family donates every year. It's good publicity. Blood money laundering, if you want to think of it that way. He sat in the chair across from her. You'll need to be ready by 7. Hair and makeup will come at 5. I can do my own hair and makeup. Not for this. Trust me, you'll want the professionals. Elena studied him. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes that makeup couldn't hide. Are you okay? The question seemed to surprise him. Why do you ask? You look exhausted. When's the last time you actually slept? I sleep. Liar. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. A few hours here and there. There's a lot to manage right now. Carlo's organization is falling apart, but that makes him more dangerous, not less. Cornered animals and all that. Has he made any moves? Nothing direct, but he's watching, waiting for an opening. Damien leaned forward, elbows on his knees. That's why tomorrow's important. We need to show a united front, prove that we're strong, that the engagement is real, that you're protected. I'm getting good at lying. I've noticed. Something in his voice made Elena look up. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, something between curiosity and concern. What? She asked. Nothing. Just thinking about how different you are from what I expected. What did you expect? Someone more fragile. Someone who would have broken by now. He stood, moving to the window. But you're tougher than you look. I'm a 3rd-grade teacher. You have to be tough to survive 28-year-olds hopped up on juice boxes. That got a real laugh from him, low and surprised. Fair point. Elena joined him at the window, looking out at the city lights. Can I ask you something else? Seems to be your favorite hobby. Why did you agree to this? The fake engagement in the first place, I mean. Why not just tell Carlo to shove his marriage alliance? Damien's jaw tightened. Because refusing would have meant war. And war means casualties on both sides. My father's trying to move us away from that life, toward legitimacy. But we can't do it if we're fighting for survival. So you were willing to marry someone you didn't love to keep the peace? Love's a luxury in my world, Elena. Most of our marriages are business arrangements, always have been. That's bleak. That's reality. He turned to face her. But for what it's worth, I'm glad the arrangement fell through. Glad I got you instead, even if it's temporary. The words hung between them, heavy with implications neither of them seemed ready to examine. Elena's heart was beating faster than it should, her skin warm where his sleeve brushed her arm. I should go to bed, she said. Big day tomorrow. Elena. His hand caught her wrist, gentle but firm. Thank you. For all of this. I know I keep saying it, but I mean it. You're welcome. She pulled away before she could do something stupid, like lean into his touch, or ask him if any of this felt as confusing to him as it did to her, because it was all still fake, still a performance, and she needed to remember that before she forgot how to tell the difference. The next evening, Elena barely recognized herself in the mirror. The hair and makeup team had transformed her into someone polished and elegant, her dark hair swept up, her face contoured and highlighted until she looked like she belonged in Damien's world. The dress Julia had sent was stunning, deep emerald green silk that hugged her curves and pooled at her feet, with a neckline that was modest but somehow still made her feel exposed. Damien stopped in the doorway when he saw her, his expression unreadable. You look beautiful, he said finally. You have to say that. I'm your fiancé. I don't have to say anything I don't mean. He moved closer, and Elena saw he was wearing a tuxedo that made him look dangerous and sophisticated in equal measure. Are you ready for this? No, but I'll manage. He offered his arm. That's the spirit. The gala was being held at a historic hotel, all crystal chandeliers and marble columns. They arrived to a wall of photographers shouting Damien's name, cameras flashing like lightning. Damien's hand settled at the small of Elena's back, warm and steady, as he guided her through the chaos. Smile, he murmured, and whatever you do, don't let go of my hand. Elena plastered on a smile and let him lead her inside. The ballroom was packed with the kind of people who looked expensive even from a distance. Politicians, business leaders, socialites dripping in diamonds. A string quartet played something classical while servers circulated with champagne. Mr. Valente. A man in his 60s approached, extending his hand. Good to see you, and this must be the famous fiancée. Elena Moretti, Damien said. Elena, this is Senator Caruso. They shook hands, exchanged pleasantries that meant nothing. The senator moved on and was immediately replaced by someone else, then someone else, an endless parade of people who wanted to meet Damien and assess his mysterious new fiancé. Elena smiled until her face hurt, nodded at the right moments, let Damien do most of the talking. Then she saw him. Carlo Castellano stood across the ballroom, watching them with cold eyes. He wasn't alone. Two men flanked him, their suits not quite hiding the bulk of weapons underneath. When his gaze met Elena's, he smiled. It wasn't friendly. He's here, she said quietly to Damien. I know. Ignore him. He's staring at me. He's trying to intimidate you. Don't give him the satisfaction. Damien's hand tightened on her waist. Dance with me. He pulled her onto the dance floor before she could argue, one hand at her back, the other clasping hers, moving them into the crowd of other dancing couples. The music had shifted to something slower, more intimate. He can't do anything here, Damien said against her hair. Too public. Too many witnesses. That's comforting. It should be. Men like Carlo thrive in shadows. Force them into the light, and they're just old men with fragile egos. Elena let herself relax slightly into his arms, trying to match his movements. He was a good dancer, smooth and confident, making her look better than she was. You're tense, he said. I'm terrified. Don't be. I won't let anything happen to you. The certainty in his voice should have been arrogant. Instead, it was just steady, like a promise he had every intention of keeping. Elena looked up at him, at the hard lines of his face softened slightly in the warm light, and felt something shift in her chest. This was dangerous. Not the event. Not Carlo watching from across the room. This. The way Damien was looking at her. The way her body fit against his like it was made to be there. The way she was starting to forget this was all pretend. "What happens when this is over?" she asked quietly. "When we break up and I go back to my normal life? You'll be safe, protected, free to do whatever you want. And you? I'll do what I've always done. Manage the family business. Make my father proud. Eventually marry someone appropriate who understands what this life requires." The thought of him with someone else created a sharp pain in Elena's chest that she had no right to feel. Sounds lonely. It is what it is. The song ended. Another began. They kept dancing, locked together in a performance that was starting to feel less like acting and more like something else entirely. Something real and terrifying and impossible. When they finally left the dance floor, Elena excused herself to the restroom, needing a moment alone to collect herself. She was washing her hands when the door opened and a woman walked in. Late 50s, elegant in black, with the kind of face that had been beautiful once and was now just hard. "You must be Elena," the woman said. "I'm Maria Castellano, Carlo's wife." Elena's blood went cold. "Nice to meet you." "Is it?" Maria moved to the mirror, checking her lipstick with practiced ease. "You've caused quite a stir, you know, ruining my husband's plans, making him look foolish." I didn't mean save it." Maria's eyes met Elena's in the mirror. "I don't care about your intentions. I care about results. And the result is that you've made an enemy of a very dangerous man. He tried to kill Damien's father. Business." Maria waved a dismissive hand. "Nothing personal, but what you did, screaming that warning, that was personal. You humiliated him, and Carlo doesn't forgive humiliation." Elena's hands were shaking. She pressed them against the cool marble counter. "What do you want?" "To give you advice. Free of charge." Maria turned to face her fully. "End the engagement. Publicly. Make it look like your choice. Walk away while you still can." "I can't do that." "Why not? Because you love him?" Maria laughed, the sound harsh. "Please, you barely know him. This whole thing is obviously a sham. Everyone sees it. Then why does your husband care so much? Because it disrupted his plans, made him look weak. And because..." Maria paused, studying Elena. "Because maybe it's not entirely a sham anymore. Maybe there's something real growing there, and that makes you an even bigger threat." "I don't understand." "Damien Valente has never cared about anyone outside his family, never let anyone close enough to matter, but the way he looks at you?" Maria's smile was cold. "That's different. That's dangerous. Because if you actually mean something to him, you become leverage, a weakness Carlo can exploit." Elena felt sick. "You're trying to scare me. Trying to save your life. Walk away. Now. Before my husband decides you're worth the risk of starting a war." Maria left without waiting for a response, her heels clicking against marble. Elena stood alone in the bathroom, her reflection pale and shaken in the ornate mirrors. She should listen, should find Damien right now and tell him she was done, that she wanted out, that the danger was too real and she wasn't brave enough to keep pretending. But when she returned to the ballroom and saw him standing with his father, his eyes scanning the crowd until they found her, relief flooding his face when they did. She couldn't do it. Whatever this was between them, fake or real or somewhere dangerous in between, she wasn't ready to walk away from it yet, even if it killed her. Elena made it halfway across the ballroom before Damien intercepted her, his hand closing around her elbow. "What happened?" he asked, eyes searching her face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Carlo's wife cornered me in the bathroom." His expression went dark. "What did she say?" "That I should end the engagement. Walk away before your father decides I'm expendable or hers decides I'm worth killing." Elena's voice was steadier than she felt. "She said everyone knows this is fake, that we're not fooling anyone. She's lying, trying to get in your head. Is she, though? Because she also said the way you look at me is different, that it's becoming real, and that makes me a target." Damien's jaw tightened. "We should leave. We just got here." "I don't care." His hand slid to her waist, possessive and protective. If Maria approached you directly, Carlo's making a move, testing boundaries. I'm not giving him another opportunity tonight. They made their excuses to Antonio and Julia, who looked concerned but didn't argue. The car ride back to the apartment was tense and silent. Damien stared out the window, his body rigid with barely contained anger. Elena wanted to ask what he was thinking, but couldn't find the words that wouldn't make everything worse. When they got upstairs, Damien went straight to the bar and poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey. He downed it in one swallow and poured another. You're going to make yourself sick, Elena said. I'm fine. You're not fine, you're furious. Of course I'm furious. He turned to face her, eyes blazing. Carlo sent his wife to threaten you. In a public place, surrounded by witnesses, and she still felt comfortable enough to corner you alone and deliver a warning. That's a power play, a message that he can get to you whenever he wants. So what do we do? I don't know. The admission seemed to cost him. My father wants to handle this diplomatically, negotiate a truce, but diplomacy only works when both sides want peace and Carlo wants blood. Elena kicked off her heels, the relief immediate. Maria said something else, that if this becomes real between us, I turn into leverage, a weakness Carlo can exploit. It's not real. The words came too fast, too defensive. Elena felt something crack in her chest. Right, of course not. Elena, it's fine. I know what this is, what we are. She moved toward the hallway, suddenly desperate to be alone. I'm going to bed. Wait! Damien caught her wrist, pulling her back. They were too close. Close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath and see the confusion in his eyes. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? I don't know. His thumb brushed over her pulse point, probably feeling how fast her heart was racing. This wasn't supposed to get complicated. Everything about this has been complicated from the start. I know, but this... He gestured between them. Whatever this is, it's different. It's dangerous, Elena finished. Maria was right about that part. The more real this feels, the more danger I'm in. Then maybe we should stop. Stop what? The engagement? We already discussed that. Your father said, no, stop fighting it. Damien's free hand came up to cup her face. Stop pretending we don't feel something here. Elena's breath caught. She should pull away, should remind him that this was all supposed to be temporary, a performance with a clear expiration date. Instead, she found herself leaning into his touch, her eyes closing. This is a bad idea, she whispered. Probably the worst I've ever had. Your family doesn't get a vote in this. Damien. He kissed her. Not the careful, performative kisses they'd shared for cameras at the gala, but something real and hungry and desperate. His mouth was hot against hers, tasting like whiskey and want, and Elena forgot every reason this was a terrible idea. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and he made a sound low in his throat that sent heat flooding through her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damien rested his forehead against hers. We can't do this, Elena said, even as her fingers stayed tangled in his shirt. I know. It's too messy, too complicated. I know. And when this is over, I don't want to think about when this is over. His hand slid into her hair, careful of the pins holding it up. I just want right now. It was the most honest thing he'd said to her since they met. No careful control, no strategic planning, just raw admission of wanting something he shouldn't have. Elena understood that feeling better than she wanted to admit. One night, she heard herself say, just tonight, and then tomorrow we go back to pretending. Deal. He kissed her again, deeper this time, walking her backward toward his bedroom. They left a trail of expensive clothing behind them. His jacket, her dress, his shirt, her jewelry scattered across marble floors. By the time they reached his bed, they were down to skin and want, and the kind of reckless need that didn't care about consequences. Afterward, lying in tangled sheets with Damien's arm around her waist, Elena stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about how badly she'd just complicated everything. This was supposed to be simple. Fake engagement, play the part, get out clean. Now she'd slept with him,
let herself feel things she had no business feeling, and crossed a line there was no uncrossing. "Stop thinking so loud," Damien murmured against her shoulder. "I'm not thinking." "Liar. I can practically hear your brain spinning." He propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her. "Regrets already?" "I don't know yet. Ask me in the morning." "Fair enough." He traced a lazy pattern on her hip. "For what it's worth, I don't regret it. You might when your father finds out. My father doesn't need to know everything about my life. He seems like the type who makes it his business to know everything. He tries, doesn't always succeed." Damien's hand stilled. "Elena, what happened tonight was just tonight. I know, we agreed. Right, just tonight." But he didn't sound convinced, and Elena wasn't sure she was either. She woke alone. Sunlight streamed through unfamiliar windows, and for a disoriented moment, Elena couldn't remember where she was. Then the memories crashed back. The gala, Maria's warning, Damien's mouth on hers. And she sat up too fast, looking for him. The other side of the bed was cold. He'd been gone for a while. Elena found a note on the nightstand in sharp, precise handwriting. "Had to go to the office. Coffee's ready in the kitchen. Stay inside today, Damien." So they were back to orders and distance. Fine. That was probably better anyway. Last night had been a mistake. A moment of weakness they'd both agreed didn't mean anything beyond the moment itself. She could handle that. She was an adult. She'd had casual sex before, except nothing about last night had felt casual. Elena showered in Damien's bathroom, using his soap that smelled like cedar and something darker, then pulled on jeans and a sweater from her room. The coffee was indeed ready, along with pastries from some expensive bakery. She ate without tasting anything, staring out at the city and trying to figure out what happened next. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You should have listened. Last warning, M. Maria." Elena's hands went cold. She should tell Damien, should forward the message to him immediately and let him handle it. Instead, she deleted it and tried to pretend her pulse wasn't racing. The day dragged. Elena read, watched television, paced the apartment like a caged animal. By evening, she was climbing the walls, desperate for fresh air and human contact that wasn't Damien or his family. When he finally came home after dark, she was standing by the window with her arms crossed. "I need to get out of here," she said without preamble. "Not safe." "I don't care. I've been locked up for days. I'm losing my mind." Damien set down his briefcase, studying her. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know. Walk around, see normal people living normal lives. Remember what that feels like." "I'll take you to dinner. Somewhere normal, not some 5-star place where everyone knows your name. I know a spot." He pulled out his phone, made a quick call in Italian. "Give me 20 minutes to change." They ended up at a small trattoria in a neighborhood Elena didn't recognize. The kind of place with checkered tablecloths and wine served in thick glasses. No bodyguards visible, though Elena suspected they were there somewhere. Damien had changed into jeans and a simple black sweater, looking more approachable than she'd ever seen him. "Better?" he asked as they settled into a corner booth. "Much." Elena accepted a menu from the waiter. "Thank you. You're welcome." He paused. "About last night. We said one night. No need to dissect it." "Right. Except I can't stop thinking about it." Elena's heart did something complicated. "Damien, I know what we agreed. I know all the reasons it's a bad idea. But I can't pretend it didn't happen or that I don't want it to happen again." "That's the whiskey talking. I'm completely sober." She wanted to argue, wanted to remind him about the danger, the complications, the inevitable ending when this fake engagement ran its course. But the way he was looking at her, open and honest, in a way she'd never seen before, made the words stick in her throat. "What are you suggesting?" she asked quietly. "I don't know. That we stop fighting whatever this is, see where it goes. And when it ends badly, when your father demands you marry someone appropriate, or Carlo decides I'm too much of a threat to leave alive, then at least we'll have had something real in the middle of all these lies." It was possibly the worst logic Elena had ever heard. It was also the most tempting. She thought about going back to the apartment, to separate bedrooms in careful distance, and felt something in her chest rebel. "Okay,
she said. Okay? Let's see where it goes, but I have conditions. A smile tugged at his mouth. Of course you do. No lying, not to each other. Whatever this is, it has to be honest or I'm out. Agreed. What else? When this ends, because it will end eventually, we do it clean. No drama, no regrets, no trying to stay friends when we both know that's impossible. Deal. Damien reached across the table, taking her hand. Anything else? Yeah. If I get killed because of your family drama, I'm haunting you forever. That got a real laugh from him, warm and surprised. Noted. I'll do my best to keep you alive. They ordered food and wine, fell into easier conversation than they'd managed since this whole thing started. Elena told him about her students, the chaos of managing 20 third graders with varying attention spans, and one kid who kept bringing his pet snake to school. Damien told her about the legitimate side of the family business, the real estate deals and import contracts that were actually legal, his careful plans to transition everything away from the criminal legacy his grandfather had built. My father wants it too, he said, tearing bread with his hands. The legitimacy. But it's harder than it sounds. You can't just walk away from decades of illegal operations without making enemies on both sides. Both sides? The criminals who think we're betraying the old ways, and the authorities who don't trust that we're actually changing. He took a drink of wine. It's like being caught between two fires. No matter which way you move, you get burned. Is that why you agreed to the marriage alliance? To help smooth the transition? Partly. Carlo's organization was one of the last major players still operating the old way. If we could bring him into the fold, convince him to go legitimate alongside us, it would have solved a lot of problems. But his daughter chose someone else. Lucky her. Damien's expression darkened. I would have made her miserable. I'm not exactly husband material. Why not? Skian. Because I'm my father's son. Because I've done things I can't take back. Because this life leaves scars, Elena, and I've got more than my share. She wanted to ask about those scars, both literal and metaphorical, but the waiter appeared with their food. They ate slowly, trading bites and stories, and Elena felt herself relaxing for the first time in days. This felt normal, easy, like they were just two people on a date instead of two people trapped in an increasingly complicated web of lies and danger. After dinner, they walked back toward the car, taking the long route through narrow streets lit by old-fashioned lamps. Damien kept his hand at the small of her back, a gesture that was becoming familiar. Comfortable. Thank you for this, Elena said. I needed it. Me too. He glanced down at her. I forget sometimes that there's a world outside the family business, outside the constant calculations and strategic moves. You could leave, start over somewhere else. No, I couldn't. This is my blood, my legacy, my responsibility. His voice was matter-of-fact. I don't get to walk away just because I'm tired of it. That's depressing. That's reality. They reached the car. The drive back was quiet, comfortable silence, instead of tense. When they got to the apartment, Elena headed toward her room out of habit, but Damien caught her hand. Stay with me, he said. Not a demand, a request. I thought we were taking this slow. We are. But I sleep better when you're there. It was too honest, too vulnerable. Elena should say no, should maintain boundaries and protect what was left of her objectivity. Instead, she let him pull her toward his bedroom, where they undressed without urgency and climbed into bed together. Damien pulled her back against his chest, his arms solid around her waist. Just sleeping, he murmured against her hair. Just sleeping, Elena agreed, even though they both knew it was a lie they'd abandoned before morning. The next week fell into a new rhythm. Damien still left early for work but came home for dinner most nights. They attended events together. Art gallery openings, charity auctions, business dinners where Elena smiled and played the devoted fiancé while learning to navigate his world. And at night they came back to the apartment and dropped the act, talking until late about everything and nothing, learning each other's histories and habits. Elena met more of the family. Marco and Alessia had returned from their honeymoon, full of stories about Positano and still radiating newlywed joy. Julia invited Elena for lunch, asked pointed questions about wedding plans that didn't exist,
offered advice about managing Damien that Elena pretended to write down. Antonio called her into his office one afternoon and gave her a brief, terrifying lecture about loyalty and family that felt like both warning and welcome. And through it all, the threat of Carlo Castellano hung over them like a storm that refused to break. "He's too quiet," Damien said one night, scrolling through reports on his tablet. "We've dismantled half his operations, arrested his key lieutenants, and he's done nothing. No retaliation, no moves against us, nothing. Maybe he's given up. Men like Carlo don't give up. They wait." He tossed the tablet aside, frustrated. "He's planning something. I just can't figure out what. Maybe that's the point. Keep you paranoid and off balance." "It's working." Elena moved to where he sat on the couch, settling into his lap. He pulled her close automatically, his tension easing slightly. "You need to sleep." "I will, eventually." "Damien, you're running yourself into the ground. When's the last time you took a full night off?" "I don't remember." "That's my point." "What?" She cupped his face, making him look at her. "You can't protect everyone from everything. At some point you have to trust that you've done enough." "Have I, though?" "Because you're still in danger. My father's still a target. Carlo's still out there planning whatever nightmare he's planning. And you being exhausted won't change any of that. It'll just make you less effective when the nightmare actually happens." He was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "How did you get so smart?" Years of managing 8-year-olds. You learn to spot when someone's running on empty and headed for a crash. "I'm not 8. "No, but you're just as stubborn." Elena kissed him, soft and quick. "Come to bed. Real sleep. No work, no phones, no checking reports every 5 minutes." "Fine, but if something happens, then we'll deal with it in the morning when you're actually functional." She pulled him to the bedroom, made him leave his phone on the nightstand, and wrapped herself around him until he had no choice but to relax. Within 20 minutes, he was asleep, his breathing deep and even. Elena lay awake longer, staring at the ceiling and trying not to think about how temporary this all was. How soon the engagement would end and she'd have to go back to her real life, leaving him behind. Except she didn't want to anymore. Somewhere between the fake smiles and real conversations, between the danger and the quiet moments after, she'd fallen for him. Actually fallen, not pretend. And that was going to destroy her when this ended. The next morning, Elena woke to raised voices in the living room. She pulled on a robe and found Damien arguing with his father, both of them speaking rapid Italian that she couldn't follow. Antonio saw her first and switched to English. "Good, you're up. Get dressed. We're moving you to the villa." "Why? What happened?" "Carlo made his move," Damien said, his face grim. "He hit 3 of our warehouses last night, burned them to the ground. It's a declaration of war." Elena's stomach dropped. "Anyone hurt?" "2 dead, several wounded." Antonio's expression was stone. "This ends now. We're bringing everyone to the villa where we can protect them properly. That includes you." "I don't need—" "This isn't negotiable." Damien's tone left no room for argument. "Carlo's escalating. Those warehouses were a message. Next time it'll be people, family, you. He doesn't even know where I am." "He has resources. He'll find out." Damien moved closer, lowering his voice. "Please, Elena, just do this. Let us protect you." The fear in his eyes convinced her more than the logic. "Okay. When do we leave?" 20 minutes. Pack what you need." The villa was locked down like a fortress. Armed guards at every entrance, security cameras covering every angle, and a tension in the air that made Elena's skin crawl. Julia had prepared rooms for her, fussing over details while clearly terrified beneath the polish. Marco and Alessia were already there, their honeymoon glow dimmed by reality. "This is insane," Alessia said that night over dinner that no one was eating. "We can't just hide here forever." "We're not hiding," Antonio corrected. "We're regrouping, planning our response." "What response? More warehouses, more bodies?" Marco's voice cracked. "This is supposed to be over. You said we were going legitimate." "We are. But Carlo doesn't want legitimacy. He wants to drag us back into the old ways." Antonio's fist hit the table. "And I won't let him." "So what's the plan?" Damien asked. "We hit him where it hurts. His money, his reputation, his remaining operations. Antonio's eyes were hard. We end this permanently. That means war, real war. We're already at war, have been since the wedding. Antonio looked at each of them. The only question is whether we fight or surrender, and Valentes don't surrender. The meeting broke up shortly after. Elena found herself on the terrace, needing air and distance from the violence being planned inside. The valley spread out below, peaceful and beautiful in the moonlight. It was hard to believe that somewhere out there, men were preparing to kill and die over territory and pride. You should be inside. Damien's voice came from behind her. I needed air. It's not safe out here. It's not safe anywhere. Elena turned to face him. Your father's planning an all-out assault. People are going to die. I know. And you're okay with that? No, but I don't see another option. He joined her at the railing, close enough that their arms brushed. Carlo started this. He chose violence. We're just responding. There's always another option. Like what? Negotiation? Compromise? We tried that. He rejected it and burned our warehouses instead. So you burn his and the cycle continues forever. Maybe. Damien was quiet for a moment. Or maybe we hit him hard enough that there's no coming back from it. No organization left to rebuild. No resources to fund another war. You mean kill him? If necessary. Elena felt sick. She'd known intellectually what Damien's world involved, but hearing him discuss murder so casually made it real in a way nothing else had. I can't be part of this. You're already part of it. The moment you screamed that warning, you chose a side. I chose to save a life, not to take them. Sometimes those things go together. He turned to face her fully. I know this isn't what you signed up for. I know you want to believe there's a clean solution where nobody gets hurt, but that's not how this works. Carlo wants my father dead, wants me dead. And now, because you're with me, he wants you dead too. The only way to stop that is to stop him, permanently. There has to be another way. If you find it, let me know. Until then, I'm going with the plan that keeps you breathing. He walked away before she could respond, leaving her alone on the terrace with her thoughts and fears. Elena wanted to argue with his logic, find the flaw in his reasoning, prove that violence wasn't the only answer, but she couldn't, because he was right about one thing. Carlo had made her a target, and passive defense would only work until it didn't. The next 3 days were tense. Damien and Antonio were gone most of the time, planning their offensive. Elena stayed at the villa with Julia and Alessia, trying to maintain normalcy while guards patrolled outside and the threat of violence hung over everything. She called her school, extended her leave of absence with vague explanations about family emergencies, called the few friends she had, lied about where she was and why. On the 4th night, Damien came to her room after midnight. He looked exhausted, his clothes rumpled, a fresh bruise darkening his jaw. What happened? Elena asked, pulling him inside. Recon went wrong. Got into a fight with Carlo's men. He touched his jaw, wincing. Other guy looks worse. That's not comforting. Wasn't meant to be. He sat on the edge of her bed. We're moving tomorrow night, hitting 3 of Carlo's locations simultaneously. If it works, we cripple his operation beyond recovery. And if it doesn't work, then we're in for a long fight. He looked up at her. I need you to promise me something. What? If things go wrong tomorrow, if Carlo retaliates here at the villa, I need you to run. Don't try to be brave. Don't try to help. Just get out and disappear. I'm not leaving you. Elena, no, I'm not having this argument. We're in this together or we're not in it at all. You don't understand what you're saying. If they breach the villa, if they get past our security, then I'll deal with it when it happens. But I'm not promising to abandon you. Damien stood, closing the distance between them. His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing her cheekbones. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met. You're just now figuring that out? I've suspected. He kissed her, hard and desperate. I don't know what I'd do if something happened to you. Then make sure nothing happens to me. I'm trying, but I can't control everything. I know. Elena pulled him closer. But you can control right now. And right now I want you here, with me, before whatever happens tomorrow. They made love with an urgency that felt like goodbye, holding each other afterward in silence that said more than words could. Elena memorized the feel of him, the sound of his breathing, the way his hand splayed across her ribs like he was afraid she'd disappear. "I love you," she said into the darkness, not caring if it was too soon or too complicated or too dangerous to admit. Damien's arms tightened around her. "I know. I love you too." "What are we going to do about that?" "I don't know. Figure it out after tomorrow. And if there's no after tomorrow, then at least we had tonight." It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was all they had, so Elena held on to him and tried not to think about the violence coming with the sunrise. Damien left before dawn. Elena felt him slip out of bed, heard him dress in the dark, and pretended to still be asleep because she didn't trust herself to say goodbye without breaking. The door closed with a soft click, and then he was gone, heading toward whatever violence the day held. She gave up on sleep after that. The villa was already stirring when she made it downstairs. Guards checking weapons, men speaking in tense clusters, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. Julia was in the kitchen directing staff with sharp efficiency, but her hands shook when she poured coffee. "They'll be fine," Elena said, not sure if she believed it. "You don't know that." Julia's composure cracked for just a second. "Antonio has survived 40 years in this life, but every time he walks out that door could be the last. And now both my sons are out there with him. Damien's careful, trained. So was his brother, the one who died when Damien was 17. Julia's voice was flat. "Shot in the back during a supposedly peaceful meeting. They sent him home in pieces." Elena's stomach turned. Damien had never mentioned a third brother. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." "Why would you? It's not something we talk about." Julia set down her cup with too much force. "My husband built this empire on blood and fear, and now my children pay for it. Marco nearly died at his own wedding. Damien lives under constant threat. And for what? Money? Power? Territory that will just get fought over again when the next ambitious criminal comes along? Then why stay? Why not leave? Because this is our family, our legacy, our responsibility." Julia's eyes were hard. "We don't get to walk away just because we're tired of the cost." It was almost word for word what Damien had said. Elena realized with sudden clarity that the Valentes were trapped by their own history, bound by obligations they hadn't chosen but couldn't escape. It made her want to grab Damien and run, disappear somewhere. His name didn't carry weight, and his legacy couldn't follow. But she knew he'd never go, and increasingly she wasn't sure she'd want him to. The man she loved included all the complicated pieces: the violence and loyalty, the danger and protection, the ruthlessness and tenderness. You couldn't extract one part without destroying the whole. The hours crawled. Elena tried to read to distract herself, but the words blurred together meaninglessly. Alessia appeared mid-morning, looking pale and drawn. "Marco left with them," she said without preamble. "I tried to stop him, but he said this was his family too, that he had to help." "Marco's not trained for this kind of thing." "I know, but try telling him that." Alessia collapsed into a chair. "He thinks he has something to prove, that he needs to be like Damien, like his father, but he's not. He's gentle, kind. He paints watercolors and cries at sad movies. He has no business being in a war." Elena sat beside her, taking her hand. "They'll protect him. Damien won't let anything happen to his brother. Damien can't control everything, no matter how much he thinks he can." They waited together after that. Two women who'd married into this world in different ways, both terrified of the violence their men had gone to meet. Julia joined them eventually, and the three of them sat in a drawing room drinking coffee that grew cold and watching the afternoon light stretch across expensive carpets. The first call came at 4. Antonio's voice on speaker, terse and controlled. "First location secured. Some resistance, but we have control. Moving to target 2. "Casualties?" Julia asked. 3 wounded, none critical. "Marco's fine," Antonio added before Alessia could ask. "Kid handled himself better than expected." "And Damien?" "Leading the assault on target 2. I'll update when we know more."
The line went dead. Julia exhaled shakily. First one down, 2 more to go. But 2 hours passed with no word. Then 3. The sun set, painting the villa's windows gold and then red and then dark. Guards changed shifts. Dinner was prepared and ignored. And still the phone stayed silent. Something's wrong, Elena said finally. They should have checked in by now. Not necessarily, Julia said, but her voice lacked conviction. These things take time. Maybe they're still securing the location. Or maybe they walked into a trap. Alessia made a sound like a wounded animal. Julia shot Elena a sharp look. Panicking won't help, she said. We wait. That's all we can do. But waiting was torture. Elena paced the room, her mind conjuring increasingly terrible scenarios. Damien injured, bleeding, calling for help that wouldn't come. Damien captured, at Carlo's mercy. Damien dead, his body cooling while she sat uselessly in safety. At 9:30, headlights swept the driveway. Elena ran to the window, saw 3 black SUVs pulling up fast. Men piled out, moving with urgent purpose, and her heart stopped because none of them were Damien. Then she saw him. Climbing out of the second vehicle, blood on his shirt but moving under his own power. Relief nearly buckled her knees. She met him at the door. He looked exhausted, his clothes torn, that bruise on his jaw now accompanied by a split lip and what looked like burns on his forearms. But he was alive. Whole. What happened? Elena asked as he pulled her into a brief, tight embrace. Carlo knew we were coming, had people waiting at the second location. We walked right into an ambush. Is everyone... Marco took a bullet, shoulder, through and through. He'll be okay, but he needs a hospital. Alessia appeared behind Elena, her face white. Where is he? Being loaded into the car. Go. They're taking him to our facility downtown. Damien squeezed Elena's hand once and let go. Antonio wants everyone in the study. Now. The study was chaos. Antonio stood at the center, his shirt soaked with blood that didn't appear to be his own, shouting orders in Italian while men reported in. Maps were spread across the desk, locations marked in red. The air smelled like cordite and sweat. Enough! Antonio roared when Damien entered. Everyone out except family. The room cleared fast. Only Antonio, Damien, Julia, and Elena remained. Antonio turned on his son, his face dark with rage. You said the intelligence was solid. You said we'd have element of surprise. The intelligence was solid 3 days ago. Carlo must have moved his operation. Or someone tipped him off. Antonio's hand slammed onto the desk. We lost the advantage, lost men. And now Carlo knows we're coming for him, which means he'll fortify his remaining positions. We've accomplished nothing except making this harder. We took the first location, Damien said evenly. Disrupted his supply chain. That's not nothing. It's not enough. He's still out there, still operational, and now he's expecting us. Antonio's voice dropped to something more dangerous than shouting. Your brother nearly died tonight because you said this would work. Marco chose to come. I told him to stay here. And you should have ordered him to stay. You're his older brother. He looks up to you, follows your lead, and you led him into an ambush. That's not fair, Julia interjected. Marco's a grown man. He made his own choice. A stupid choice, one Damien should have prevented. Antonio straightened, some of the fury draining into exhaustion. Carlo's going to retaliate. Tonight proved we're serious about ending him, which means he'll be serious about ending us. We need to move everyone to the safe house. Now. We're secure here, Damien said. We thought we were secure at the second location too. Look how that turned out. Antonio's gaze moved to Elena. Especially her. Carlo knows she's the reason his first assassination attempt failed. He'll want revenge. I can protect her here. You said you could protect Marco too. The words hit like a physical blow. Damien's expression went carefully blank, but Elena saw the flinch in his eyes. Julia made a soft sound of protest. That was cruel, Antonio, she said. It was honest. But Antonio's voice had lost its edge. He looked old suddenly, worn down by decades of violence and loss. I'm not trying to hurt you, son. I'm trying to keep this family alive. And right now that means acknowledging we're vulnerable.
Carlo outmaneuvered us once. He'll try again. We need to be smarter, faster, more careful. What do you want me to do? Damien asked quietly. Take Elena to the safe house. Stay there until we have a better read on Carlo's position. Let me handle the next phase. You can't go after him alone. I won't be alone. I have men, resources. What I don't need is to worry about you or Elena getting caught in the crossfire. Antonio moved around the desk, put a hand on Damien's shoulder. You've done enough. Let me finish this. It was a dismissal wrapped in paternal concern. Damien understood that. Elena could see it in the set of his jaw, the tension in his shoulders. Being sidelined wasn't protection. It was punishment for the ambush that had nearly killed Marco. When do we leave? Damien asked. Within the hour. I'll have the location sent to your secure phone. They packed in silence. Elena threw clothes into a bag without really seeing them, her mind replaying the confrontation. Antonio blaming Damien for Marco's injury. Damien taking it without defending himself. The weight of responsibility crushing him under obligations he hadn't asked for, but couldn't refuse. He didn't mean it, Elena said when they were alone. About Marco. That wasn't your fault. Wasn't it? I knew the risk. Should have insisted Marco stay behind. He's an adult. You said it yourself. He's my baby brother. He paints. He cries at movies. Damien smiled without humor. Alessia told you that, didn't she? She's terrified. We all are. Yeah. Well, terror's part of the package. He zipped his bag with too much force. Come on, car's waiting. The safe house turned out to be a cabin in the mountains, accessible only by a winding road that would be easy to defend and easier to block. 2 guards were already stationed when they arrived, ex-military types who checked IDs and swept the car before waving them through. Inside, the cabin was surprisingly nice, rustic but comfortable, with a stone fireplace and windows overlooking a valley that probably had a spectacular view in daylight. Now it just showed darkness and the distant lights of the city below. Not what I expected, Elena said. What did you expect? Concrete bunker with canned food and guns? Something like that. We have those too, but this one's meant for longer stays, more comfortable. Damien moved through the space with practiced ease, checking locks and sightlines. There's a panic room in the basement if we need it. Supplies for 2 weeks. Satellite phone with encrypted line. How often do you use places like this? More than I'd like. He opened the refrigerator, stocked with basics. Get comfortable. We might be here a while. The first night was tense. Every sound made Elena jump. Wind in the trees and owl hunting, the house settling. Damien barely slept, checking his phone constantly for updates that didn't come. Around 3 a.m, she found him on the couch, staring at nothing. Come to bed, she said. Can't sleep. Then don't sleep, but do it in bed where I can at least pretend you're resting. He followed her without argument, let her pull him down and wrap herself around him. His body was rigid against hers, every muscle locked tight with tension. Talk to me, Elena said. What's going on in your head? Marco almost died tonight because I miscalculated. Because I thought I had better intelligence than I did. Because I was arrogant enough to think I could predict Carlo's moves. You're not responsible for Carlo's actions. I'm responsible for my family's safety. That's literally my job, and I failed. Marco's alive. He's going to be fine. This time. What about next time? Or the time after that? Damien's voice was rough. I can't keep them all safe, Elena. I can't control everything. And people keep getting hurt because I'm trying. Then stop trying to control everything. Accept that sometimes bad things happen and it's not your fault. Easy for you to say. Is it? Because I've spent the last month watching you carry the weight of your entire family on your shoulders. Watching you blame yourself for things you didn't cause and can't prevent. It's killing you, Damien, and I don't know how to help. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller. I had another brother, Luca. He was older than me by 2 years, smarter, funnier, better at everything. My father's favorite. Julia mentioned him. She said he died. He was murdered. I was there. We were meeting with a rival family, supposed to be neutral ground, and someone opened fire. Luca pushed me behind a table, took the bullets meant for me.
I held him while he bled out on a warehouse floor, and there was nothing I could do except watch him die. Elena's heart broke. Damien, I'm so sorry. I was 17. I remember thinking if I had been faster, stronger, better, I could have saved him, could have done something other than hide like a coward while my brother died protecting me. You weren't a coward. You were 17 and someone was shooting at you. I know that logically, but it doesn't change how it feels, like I've been trying to make up for that moment ever since. Prove I'm worth the life he gave me. And tonight with Marco, all I could think was not again. I can't lose another brother because I wasn't good enough to protect him. Elena understood then. The weight he carried wasn't just responsibility. It was survivor's guilt compounded by years of trying to be perfect enough to deserve living while Luca died. It was impossible and heartbreaking and so deeply human that she wanted to cry for him. You are enough, she said fiercely. You've always been enough. Luca didn't die because you failed. He died because someone murdered him.
And Marco got shot because Carlos set a trap, not because you made a mistake. You can't keep blaming yourself for violence other people choose. I don't know how to stop. Then let me help you. Let someone else carry some of this weight instead of doing it all alone. Damien pulled her closer, his face buried in her hair. I love you. I know this is temporary. I know when this is over, you'll go back to your real life and forget about the crazy criminal you played house with for a few weeks. But right now, in this moment, I love you more than I've ever loved anyone. This is my real life now, and I'm not going anywhere. You should. When this ends, when Carlos dealt with, you should run as far from me as possible. Find some normal guy who teaches history and coaches Little League, someone safe. I don't want safe. I want you. You say that now. But eventually you'll realize what being with me really means. The constant danger, the impossible choices, the blood that never quite washes off. You'll realize I'm not worth it. Stop telling me what I'll eventually think and feel. I'm here now, choosing you now, and that should be enough. It is. It's more than enough. He kissed her, desperate and grateful. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. They made love slowly, carefully, like they were memorizing each other for when they'd inevitably be torn apart. Afterward, Damien finally slept, exhaustion winning over anxiety. Elena stayed awake, watching him in the dim light and trying not to think about endings. 3 days passed in strange isolation. Updates came sporadically. Marco was recovering well. Antonio was planning his next move. Carlo had gone to ground somewhere outside the city. Damien spent hours on encrypted calls, managing family business from a distance. Elena read every book in the cabin and took long walks around the property with guards shadowing her at a distance. It almost felt peaceful, like they were a normal couple on a mountain getaway instead of hiding from assassins. Almost. On the 4th night, Damien's phone rang at 2 a.m. He answered immediately, listened in silence, then hung up with a curse. What happened? Elena asked, sitting up. Carlo hit one of our legitimate businesses, the real estate office downtown, burned it to the ground with people still inside. His voice was flat. 4 dead, all civilians, accountants and receptionists who had nothing to do with the family business. Elena felt sick. He's targeting innocents now. He's sending a message that nowhere is safe, that he can reach anyone connected to us. Damien was already dressing, pulling on clothes with sharp movements. I have to go back. Your father said to stay here. My father isn't the one watching innocent people die because they had the bad luck to work for a Valente company. He strapped on a shoulder holster, checked his gun. I'm done hiding, done letting Antonio handle this while more people get hurt. Then I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. You don't get to make that call. Elena, this is going to get ugly. Carlo's not playing by any rules anymore. I can't worry about protecting you while trying to end this. You won't have to protect me. I'll protect myself. With what? Your extensive combat training for managing 3rd graders? The sarcasm stung. Elena got out of bed, moved to stand in front of him. I'm not helpless, and I'm not staying here alone while you run toward danger. This isn't up for discussion. You're right. It's not, because I'm coming whether you agree or not.
Either we leave together or I wait 10 minutes and follow in the other car. Your choice. Damien stared at her, frustration and admiration warring in his expression. You're the most stubborn. Yeah, we've established that. Are we doing this or are we wasting time arguing? Fine, but you stay in the car. You do exactly what I say, and if things go sideways, you run. No arguing, no trying to help, just run. Deal? Deal. They both knew she was lying. The drive back to the city was tense and silent. Damien drove too fast on mountain roads that probably had bears or worse. His phone kept buzzing with updates. Antonio mobilizing men, Carlo's location still unknown. More violence threatened if the Valentes didn't back down. He wants a meeting, Damien said finally, reading a message. Neutral ground. Just him and my father. End this face to face. That's a trap. Obviously, but Antonio's actually considering it. That's insane. That's my father. He thinks he can negotiate with anyone, reason with anyone. Doesn't matter how many times it's proven wrong. Damien's hands tightened on the wheel. He's going to get himself killed trying to avoid more bloodshed. Can you stop him? I can try. They reached the villa as the sun was rising, painting everything gold and deceptively peaceful. But the grounds were crawling with armed men, everyone tense and ready for violence. Antonio was in his study with a dozen advisors, arguing strategy in rapid Italian. I told you to stay at the safe house, he said when Damien entered. And I told you I was done sitting out. What's this about a meeting with Carlo? None of your concern. It is when you're walking into an obvious trap. I can handle myself. Luca thought that too. The words came out harder than Damien probably intended. The room went silent. Antonio's face darkened. Don't, he said quietly. Don't what? Don't point out that you're making the same mistake that got your oldest son killed? Don't try to stop you from getting yourself murdered because you're too proud to admit some people can't be reasoned with? Damien, Carlo doesn't want peace. He wants our heads on stakes. And if you walk into that meeting, he'll get what he wants. Antonio stood slowly, moving around the desk. For a moment, Elena thought he might hit his son. Instead, he just looked at him with something like pity. You think I don't know it's a trap? You think I've survived this long by being naive? His voice was soft, dangerous. I know exactly what Carlo wants, but I also know that if I refuse this meeting, he'll keep escalating, keep killing innocents, keep burning our world down until there's nothing left. So yes, I'm going. And yes, it's probably a trap. But maybe, just maybe, I can end this without losing more family. Or you'll just hand him exactly what he wants. Then you'll have to trust me to know the difference. It wasn't trust Damien lacked, Elena realized. It was faith that his father could survive what was coming. And given the family's history, that lack of faith felt earned. Let me come with you, Damien said. At least have backup. No, this meeting is just me and Carlo. Those are his terms. Terms you shouldn't accept. I've already accepted them. Meetings in 2 hours at the old shipping yard on the East Docks. If I'm not back by sunset, you're in charge. Understand? It was as close to goodbye as Antonio would give. Damien's jaw worked, everything he wanted to say locked behind training and discipline and the weight of being the heir who couldn't afford to break. Understood, he said finally. Antonio nodded once and turned to his advisors, already moving to the next problem. Dismissed, Damien walked out with Elena following. She caught up to him in the hallway. He's not going to change his mind, she said. I know. So what are we going to do? Damien stopped, turned to face her. We're not doing anything. I'm following him to that meeting with enough men to end Carlo's operation permanently. You're staying here where it's safe. We already had this argument. I'm coming. Elena, no, listen to me. She grabbed his arm, made him look at her. I understand you're scared. I understand you think you can control this by leaving me behind. But I'm not asking for permission. I'm telling you I'm coming. And if you try to lock me in a room or drug my coffee or whatever ridiculous thing you're considering, I will never forgive you. Are we clear? He looked at her for a long moment, something like awe in his expression. You really are the most terrifying woman I've ever met. Is that a yes? It's an acknowledgement that arguing with you is pointless. He sighed.
Fine. But you stay in the car with the backup team. You don't get out, you don't engage, you just observe and be ready to run if everything goes to hell. I can live with that. I doubt it, but at least I can say I tried. 2 hours later, they were positioned a quarter-mile from the shipping yard in an SUV with two of Antonio's best men. Through binoculars, Elena could see the meeting point, an open space between rusted shipping containers, exposed on all sides. A kill box, basically. Antonio's car pulled up right on time. "He's actually doing it," Damien muttered. "The crazy bastard is actually doing it." A second car appeared from the opposite direction. Elena watched Carlo Castellano climb out, flanked by two men. He was smaller than she'd expected, ordinary-looking except for the coldness in his eyes, visible even from a distance. Antonio got out alone. The two men approached each other slowly, stopping about 10 feet apart. Words were exchanged, too far to hear. Antonio's posture was relaxed, confident. Carlo's was coiled, ready. "Something's wrong," one of the guards said. "Too exposed. Where's Carlo's backup?" "Maybe he actually came alone," Elena said. "Men like Carlo don't do anything alone." Damien's hand went to his weapon. "This is wrong. We need to—" The first shot came from a shipping container behind Antonio. He went down hard, clutching his leg. More shots from different directions, Carlo's men firing at the same time. Antonio's driver tried to return fire and was cut down immediately. "Go!" Damien shouted, already moving. "Get Antonio out of there." The SUV surged forward, tires screaming. More vehicles appeared from their hidden positions, Damien's men flooding the shipping yard. It turned into a war zone in seconds. Automatic weapons fire, men running and falling, Carlo's trap sprung and Damien's counter-trap closing around him. Elena saw Carlo running for his car, saw Antonio trying to crawl to cover, blood trailing behind him. Saw Damien leap from the moving SUV and sprint toward his father through a storm of bullets that should have killed him, but somehow didn't. Then she saw something else. Two of Carlo's men circling around trying to flank Damien's position. They had a clear shot at him, and he didn't see them because he was focused on reaching Antonio. Elena didn't think, just moved. She was out of the SUV before the guard could stop her, running across exposed ground toward the flanking shooters. She had no weapon, no plan, nothing but desperate need to stop what was about to happen. One of the men saw her, swung his gun toward her instead of Damien. The other kept his aim steady, finger tightening on the trigger. "Damien!" Elena screamed. "Behind you!" He turned, saw the threat, dropped and rolled as bullets tore through the space where his head had been. Return fire from his men cut down one shooter. The other was still standing, still aiming, and Elena was close enough now to do something stupid. She grabbed a piece of metal pipe from the ground and swung it at his knees. He went down with a curse, his shot going wide. Elena hit him again, harder this time, and the gun skittered away across concrete. Then hands were pulling her back, one of Damien's guards dragging her toward cover. "What the hell are you doing?" the guard shouted. "Saving his life." More gunfire. Elena saw Damien reach Antonio, saw him lift his father over his shoulder and carry him toward safety. Saw Carlo's car speeding away, abandoning his men to their fate. Within minutes, it was over. Carlo's people dead or surrendered, the shipping yard secured. Damien appeared in front of Elena, his face twisted with fury and fear. "You got out of the car. You ran into an active firefight. You could have been killed. But I wasn't, and neither were you. You're welcome. Don't you dare make jokes. I told you to stay in the vehicle. I gave you one simple instruction and you ignored it and nearly got yourself shot. I saved your life. I didn't ask you to save my life. I asked you to stay safe." They were both shouting now, adrenaline and terror translating to anger, because anger was easier than admitting how scared they'd been. Around them, men were securing prisoners and tending to wounded and pretending not to notice the argument. "Your father's hurt," Elena said finally, voice shaking. "We should worry about him instead of fighting about this." Damien's expression cracked. "He took 2 bullets, leg and shoulder. Paramedics are working on him now, but—" His voice broke. "But I don't know if he'll make it." Elena pulled him close, feeling him shake against her, all the fear he'd been holding back flooding out now that the immediate danger had passed. She held him while he fell apart. This man who carried the weight of his family and tried so hard to keep everyone safe. "He's tough," she said. He'll make it. You don't know that. No, but I choose to believe it anyway. Damien pulled back, wiping his eyes roughly. Carlo got away. Again. But you have his men. They'll talk. Maybe, if they're more afraid of us than they are of him. He looked at her, really looked at her, and his expression softened. You're bleeding. Elena looked down. There was blood on her arm, a graze from where a bullet had come closer than she'd realized. It's nothing. It's not nothing. He pulled her toward a paramedic, insisted she get checked despite her protests. The wound was cleaned and bandaged, declared minor. The whole time Damien held her other hand like he was afraid she'd disappear. When they finally made it to the hospital where Antonio had been taken, the waiting room was full of family. Julia sat rigid and pale, Marco with his arm in a sling beside Alicia. They all looked up when Damien and Elena entered. He's in surgery, Julia said. They won't tell me anything except that he's alive. Damien sat beside his mother, and Elena watched some unspoken communication pass between them. Grief and fear, and the terrible knowledge that this life they'd chosen extracted brutal prices. Hours passed. Surgeons came and went with updates that meant nothing. Stable, critical, fighting. Elena brought coffee that nobody drank. Alessia paced. Marco stared at the wall, and Damien sat perfectly still, holding his mother's hand, looking like he was carved from stone. Finally, as night fell outside the hospital windows, a surgeon appeared. He's out of surgery, she said. It was touch and go for a while, but he pulled through. He's stable now. Julia's breath came out in a sob. Damien closed his eyes, relief washing over his features. Marco actually smiled. Can we see him? Julia asked. He's in recovery. Give him a few hours and then you can visit, 2 at a time. When the surgeon left, Julia turned to Damien. You should go home. Clean up. You're covered in blood. I'm staying until I can see him. Damien, I'm staying. Julia looked at Elena, a silent plea for help. Elena shook her head slightly. He needed this. Needed to see with his own eyes that his father survived. Needed to know he hadn't lost another family member to violence he couldn't prevent. So they waited. Eventually, Julia was called back first, leaving the rest of them in uncomfortable silence. When she returned, she looked older but less brittle. He's asking for you, she told Damien. Elena watched him walk away, shoulders squared, ready to face whatever came next. Marco moved to sit beside her. Thank you, he said quietly, for what you did today. Damien told me you ran into gunfire to warn him. I didn't think about it, just moved. That's bravery, real bravery. Marco smiled slightly. I can see why he loves you. He told you that? Didn't have to. It's obvious. The way he looks at you, talks about you, worries about you. I've never seen him like this with anyone. Your mother said the same thing at the gala, like it's surprising. It is. Damien's never let anyone close. Not after Luca died. He's been alone by choice, convinced that caring about people just gives the world more ways to hurt him. Marco's expression turned serious, but you got through somehow. Made him care again. That's either the best thing that could have happened to him or the worst. Time will tell which. You really know how to give a pep talk. Sorry, just being honest. Marco stood as Alicia returned from the cafeteria with sandwiches nobody wanted. Whatever happens next, with Carlo and the war and all of it, I'm glad you're here. Glad Damien has someone who'll run into danger for him. He needs that. When Damien finally emerged from Antonio's room, he looked lighter. Still exhausted and bloodstained, but some fundamental weight had lifted from his shoulders. He found Elena and pulled her into a hallway. He's okay, Damien said. Weak, but okay. Doctors think he'll make a full recovery. That's good. That's really good. He wants to meet with you, tomorrow, when he's stronger. Said he has things to discuss. What things? Wouldn't say, but knowing my father, probably either gratitude or orders. Hard to tell which. Elena laughed, the sound bordering on hysterical after the stress of the day. Your family is exhausting. I know, and you're stuck with us now. Damien cupped her face. After what you did today, after you saved my life, there's no walking away. Your family. For better or worse. Is that a threat or a promise? Both. He kissed her there in the hospital hallway, not caring who saw, and Elena kissed him back with everything she had. They'd survived another day of violence. Antonio would live. Carlo was still out there somewhere, but they'd deal with that tomorrow. For now, this was enough. This moment, this man, this impossible love that had grown in the space between lies and truth. It had to be enough. Because Elena was starting to suspect it was all they'd get. Antonio looked smaller in the hospital bed, diminished by bandages and IV lines. But his eyes were sharp when Elena entered his room the next afternoon, tracking her movement from door to chair with the same assessing intensity he'd used at their first meeting. "Sit," he said, his voice rough from the breathing tube they'd removed that morning. "We need to talk." Elena sat. Damien had offered to come with her, but Antonio had been specific, just Elena. She had a feeling she knew what this was about. "My son tells me you saved his life yesterday," Antonio continued. "Ran into an active firefight without thinking, without training, just pure instinct to protect him. I didn't think about it. I just moved." That's what makes it remarkable. Most people freeze when shots are fired. Even trained soldiers sometimes freeze. But you ran toward danger because someone you love was in it. Antonio shifted, wincing at the pain. That kind of loyalty is rare, precious. "I didn't do it for loyalty. I did it because I couldn't stand the thought of him dying." Same thing, different words. Antonio studied her. "When this arrangement started, I thought you were just a convenient actress, someone to play a role for a few weeks and then disappear. But you've become something else, something important to my son, to my family." Elena's chest tightened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying the engagement doesn't have to be fake anymore. If you want it to be real, if you want to actually join this family, you have my blessing." The offer hung between them, enormous and terrifying. Everything Elena had told herself she didn't want. Permanent entanglement with the Valentes, a life of constant danger, marriage to a man whose world was built on violence. "And if I don't want it?" she asked quietly. "Then you're free to go. The threat from Carlo will be handled soon, one way or another. We'll set you up somewhere safe, give you enough money to start over, and you'll never hear from us again." Antonio's expression softened. "I won't force you into this life, Elena. It has to be your choice. But I want you to know you'd be welcomed, truly welcomed, not just tolerated. You've earned that." "What does Damien want?" "You'll have to ask him that yourself, though I suspect you already know the answer." Elena did know, had known since that first kiss in his apartment, since the night he told her he loved her, since every moment after when they'd chosen each other despite the danger. But knowing what Damien wanted and knowing what she could live with were different things. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Take all the time you need. Just know that whatever you decide, you'll have my gratitude. You saved my life at that wedding. Saved it again yesterday by protecting my son. That debt won't be forgotten regardless of what happens next." Elena left the hospital room with her head spinning. She found Damien in the waiting area, and one look at her face told him everything. "He offered to make it real," Damien said. "Not a question." "Yeah." "What did you say?" "That I needed to think about it." Elena sat beside him. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to say yes. I want you to stay. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep next to you every night and build something permanent in the middle of all this chaos." He took her hand. "But I also want you to be happy, safe, free from the constant fear that comes with this life. So I don't know what I want because wanting you means wanting things that might destroy you." Very poetic, not helpful. "I know." He smiled slightly. "What do you want?" Elena thought about her apartment gathering dust, her classroom waiting for her return, the normal life she'd left behind that felt like it belonged to someone else now. Then she thought about Damien's hands on her skin, his laugh in the dark, the way he looked at her like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting. "I want you," she said, "but I also want to not die in a shootout before I'm 30. I want to not spend every day wondering if today's the day someone comes after us. I want to not live in constant fear."
Those things are mutually exclusive. Are they? Because your father keeps talking about going legitimate, moving away from the criminal operations. What if that's actually possible? It is, eventually. But it takes time, and Carlo's not going to give us that time. He wants war, and war doesn't have a pause button. As if summoned by his name, Damien's phone rang. He listened for a moment, his expression darkening, then hung up. They found Carlo, he said, holed up in a warehouse outside the city with what's left of his organization. My father's men have the building surrounded. What happens now? Now we end this. Damien stood. I have to go. This needs to be finished. I'm coming with you. Elena, don't. We're past the part where you try to protect me by leaving me behind. I'm coming, and you're going to let me because you know I'll just follow you anyway. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Fine, but you stay back, way back. This is going to get bloody. The warehouse was in an industrial area that looked abandoned, surrounded by rusted machinery and overgrown lots. Damien's forces had set up a perimeter, heavily armed men positioned at every exit. Elena stayed in an SUV 2 blocks away with guards, while Damien went to coordinate with the team leaders. Through binoculars, she could see the warehouse. No movement, no lights, nothing to indicate anyone was inside. It looked like a trap. Something's wrong, one of the guards muttered, echoing her thoughts. Then the warehouse exploded. The blast was enormous. A fireball that lit up the evening sky and sent debris raining down across 3 blocks. The SUV rocked from the shockwave. Elena's ears rang, the world going temporarily silent except for a high-pitched whine. Damien? She heard herself say, though she couldn't hear her own voice. Where's Damien? She was out of the vehicle before the guards could stop her, running toward the warehouse through smoke and chaos. Men were scattered on the ground, some moving, some not. Fire was everywhere, the heat intense even from a distance. Damien! Elena screamed, searching faces, looking for him among the wounded and dead. Then she saw him. On his knees beside a body, his face black with soot, blood running from a cut on his forehead. He looked up when she called his name, and relief flooded his features. Get back, he shouted. Building's not stable. Are you hurt? I'm fine. But Carlo... He gestured to the body beside him. Elena moved closer and saw Carlo Castellano, or what was left of him. The explosion had killed him instantly, probably killed everyone inside the warehouse. It was over. The war, the threat, everything, finished in fire and rubble. He booby-trapped the building, Damien said, standing on shaky legs. Knew we'd find him eventually and set it to blow when we breached. Took himself out rather than face capture. Your men. 3 dead, 7 wounded. Could have been worse if we hadn't been setting up a perimeter instead of rushing in. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. It's over. Carlo's gone. His organization's destroyed. It's actually over. Elena held him while emergency services arrived, while the fire was brought under control, while bodies were recovered and the wounded were taken to hospitals. She held him through the terrible aftermath and the official reports and the long drive back to the villa where Antonio was waiting for news. It's done, Damien told his father. Carlo's dead. His people are scattered. There's no one left to retaliate. Antonio nodded from his wheelchair, looking older and more tired than Elena had ever seen him. Then it's time to finish what we started. The transition to legitimacy. No more criminal operations, no more wars. We rebuild as a legal enterprise. That'll take years. Then we start now. Tonight. Before anyone else dies for this legacy I built on blood and fear. Antonio's voice was firm despite the exhaustion. I'm done with this life, Damien. Done watching my sons bleed for territory that means nothing. Done losing people I love to violence that never ends. We make the change now, or we don't make it at all. It was a moment Elena would remember forever. Antonio Valente, patriarch of a criminal empire, choosing peace over power, choosing life over legacy. It shouldn't have been revolutionary, but in his world, it was. The next weeks were chaos of a different kind. Lawyers and accountants working around the clock to restructure the family businesses.
Assets being liquidated, illegal operations shut down, territory ceded to other families in exchange for peace agreements. Antonio managed it all from his wheelchair, ruthless in his efficiency, even diminished by injury. Damien was at the center of it, negotiating deals, managing relationships, building bridges with people who'd been enemies for decades. Elena watched him transform from enforcer to businessman, trading guns for contracts and violence for strategy. He was good at it, she realized. Better than he'd been at the criminal side, because this work didn't require him to suppress his humanity. "We're launching a foundation," he told her one night over dinner at the apartment, the Antonio Valente Foundation for Youth Education. Taking the money we made from illegal operations and putting it towards scholarships, after-school programs, community centers in underserved areas. "Blood money laundering through charity," Elena said. "Maybe, but it's still money that'll help kids who need it. Money that'll do some good instead of just funding more violence." He paused. "We want you to run it, the foundation. You're a teacher. You understand what these communities need, and you're the only person I trust to do it honestly." Elena stared at him. "That's a huge job." "I know, but you can handle it, if you want to." His expression was carefully neutral. It would mean staying, permanently, becoming part of the family for real. "Is this your way of proposing?" "No, when I propose, it'll be more romantic than offering you a job." He smiled slightly. "This is me trying to show you what a life with us could look like. Not just danger and violence, but actual purpose, using the resources we have to make things better. And if I say yes to the foundation but no to the engagement, then you say yes to the foundation and no to the engagement. They're not conditional on each other. I want you here either way." Elena thought about her classroom, her students, the life she'd built before all this started. Then she thought about the kids in neighborhoods like the one she'd grown up in, struggling for opportunities that came easy to others. She thought about having the resources to actually help instead of just managing with scraps. "I'll do it," she said. "The foundation. But I need conditions." "Name them." "Full autonomy. I make the decisions about programs and funding without interference from the family business. And no strings attached. The money goes where it's needed, not where it benefits the Valentes politically." "Done. What else?" "I want to keep teaching. 1 day a week, at least. I can't give up my classroom completely." "We'll make it work." "Anything else?" "Yeah." Elena took a breath. "I need you to propose properly, not as a business arrangement or a protection scheme or whatever this started as. If we're doing this, if I'm actually marrying you, it has to be real. No lies, no pretending, just us choosing each other." Damien's smile was slow and genuine. "I can do that." He did it 3 weeks later, on a Saturday morning when they were still in bed and the sunlight was streaming through the windows. No grand gesture, no elaborate setup, just him turning to her and saying, "Marry me, for real this time, because I love you, and I can't imagine my life without you in it." Elena said yes before he finished the sentence. They told the family that afternoon. Julia cried and immediately started planning a wedding that would apparently require a year's preparation. Antonio gave his blessing from the head of the table, looking satisfied like he'd orchestrated the whole thing himself. Marco and Alessia raised glasses in a toast, genuinely happy for them. "I can't believe this started with me desperately grabbing a stranger at a wedding," Julia said, wiping her eyes. "And now she's going to be my daughter for real." "Shows what desperation can accomplish," Elena said. "Shows that sometimes fate intervenes," Antonio corrected. "You were meant to be part of this family, Elena. The wedding was just the universe's way of making sure you met." Elena didn't believe in fate, but she smiled and let him have the moment. Because whether it was fate or coincidence or just blind luck, she'd ended up exactly where she was supposed to be. The foundation launched 6 months later. Elena threw herself into the work, building programs and partnerships, hiring staff who actually cared about the mission instead of just collecting paychecks. It was exhausting and frustrating and the most rewarding thing she'd ever done. Watching kids light up when they got scholarship letters, seeing community centers transform neighborhoods, knowing that money once used for violence was now building futures, it made everything that had happened worth it. Damien proposed they get married at the same villa where they'd met, and Elena agreed on one condition: no fake elements this time. Real vows, real ceremony, real celebration of something that had started as lies but become the most honest thing in both their lives. The wedding was smaller than Marco and Alessia's had been. Just family and close friends, no business associates or political allies. Elena wore a dress she actually chose herself, simple ivory that made her feel beautiful instead of costumed. Damien wore a suit that didn't hide weapons because they didn't need them anymore. Antonio walked her down the aisle, still using a cane but stronger than he'd been in months. "You saved my son," he said quietly as they walked, "in more ways than one. Thank you for that." "He saved me too," Elena replied. The ceremony was short and sweet. They exchanged rings and vows they'd written themselves, promising not perfection, but partnership. Promising to be honest even when it was hard, to protect each other without smothering, to build something good from the ashes of everything that had come before. When the officiant pronounced them married, Damien kissed her like he'd been waiting his whole life for permission. Maybe he had been. The reception was joyful and loud, filled with toasts and dancing and laughter. Marco gave a speech about how his serious older brother had been transformed by love, getting sappy enough that Alessia had to pull him down before he embarrassed himself further. Julia welcomed Elena to the family officially, with actual warmth instead of the desperate calculation of their first meeting. And Antonio, seated at the head table with wine he shouldn't be drinking, but was anyway, raised his glass for a final toast. "To Elena and Damien," he said, "who proved that sometimes the best things in life come from the worst situations, who took a desperate lie and made it into something true and beautiful. May you have many years of happiness together, and may you never again have to dodge bullets at a wedding." Everyone laughed and drank, and Elena felt Damien's hand find hers under the table. "Happy?" he asked quietly. "Surprisingly, yes." "Good, because you're stuck with me now. I think I can live with that." They danced until late, celebrating not just a wedding but an ending and a beginning. The end of Carlo's threat, of criminal operations, of living in constant fear. The beginning of legitimate businesses, of the foundation's work, of a future they could actually plan for. When they finally left the reception, rice and flower petals falling around them, Elena looked back at the villa one last time. The place where she'd been dragged into a nightmare, where she'd screamed a warning that saved lives, where she'd fallen in love with a man who shouldn't have made sense but somehow did. "Second thoughts?" Damien asked, following her gaze. "Just thinking about how insane this all is. 6 months ago, I was a third-grade teacher with a quiet life and no complications. Now I'm married to a former criminal running a multi-million-dollar foundation. Technically, I'm a current businessman, not a former criminal." "That's what you focused on in that sentence?" "I'm detail-oriented." He pulled her close. "Do you regret it? Any of it?" Elena thought about the fear and the violence, the night she'd been sure she wouldn't survive. Then she thought about the love and the purpose, the way she'd found parts of herself she didn't know existed, the way Damien looked at her like she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. "No," she said honestly. "I don't regret any of it." Which probably says something disturbing about my judgment, but there it is. "Your judgment is perfect. You chose me, didn't you? That's my point exactly." They drove to the airport for their honeymoon. 2 weeks in Greece, far from family and responsibility and the weight of the past. Just them, the ocean, and the future stretching out ahead. On the plane, somewhere over the Atlantic, Damien fell asleep with his head on Elena's shoulder. She stayed awake, watching the darkness outside the window and thinking about everything that had led to this moment. She'd learned that love wasn't always clean or simple or safe, that sometimes the best relationships grew from the worst circumstances, that you could start with lies and end with truth, start with fear and end with trust, start with strangers and end with soulmates. She'd learned that families were complicated, that redemption was possible, that people could change if they wanted it badly enough, that violence could be transformed into purpose, blood money into scholarships, empires built on fear into foundations built on hope. Most importantly, she'd learned that she was braver than she'd ever known. That when someone she loved was in danger, she'd run toward it without thinking. that she could survive in a world that terrified her and come out stronger on the other side. When Damien woke as they began their descent into Athens, Elena was still awake. "You okay?" he asked, blinking sleep from his eyes. "Yeah, just thinking." "About?" "About how we started. A fake engagement at a wedding that turned into a war zone. And now here we are, actually married, actually building a life together. It's ridiculous." Best kind of ridiculous. He kissed her temple. "I love you, you know." "I know. I love you too. Even though I almost got you killed multiple times? Even though I'm stubborn like that." They collected their bags in Athens and took a car to the small island where they'd rented a villa. It overlooked the Mediterranean, white walls and blue shutters, and the kind of peace that felt foreign after months of chaos. That first night, sitting on the terrace with wine and stars overhead, Damien asked the question Elena had been waiting for. "What happens when we go back? When real life starts again?" "We work. You run the legitimate businesses. I run the foundation. We have dinner with your family on Sundays and argue about normal things like whose turn it is to do dishes." "Sounds boring." "Sounds perfect." "What about kids? Do you want them?" Elena hadn't let herself think that far ahead. Kids meant permanence, meant fully committing to this life, meant bringing new people into a world that was safer now, but would never be completely safe. "Eventually," she said carefully, "when we're ready, when we've built something stable enough to bring them into." "So yes." "So eventually, yes." She turned to face him. "Is that okay?" "It's more than okay. It's everything." Damien pulled her into his lap, arms secure around her waist. "I never thought I'd have this. A real marriage, a real future, kids and normalcy and all the things I'd given up on. And then you happened. I was forced to happen. Your mother grabbed me, remember? Best thing she ever did." He kissed her, slow and thorough. "Thank you for being stubborn enough to stay, for not running when any sane person would have." "Who says I'm sane? I married you, didn't I?" "Fair point." They made love that night with the ocean sounds drifting through open windows, taking their time because they had nothing but time now. No threats hanging over them, no enemies to watch for, just two people building something real from the ashes of everything that had tried to destroy them. In the morning, Elena woke to find Damien already up, standing on the terrace with coffee and the sunrise painting the sky impossible colors. She joined him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders without looking away from the view. "I was thinking," he said, "about the foundation, about expanding it internationally, using the family's overseas connections for something good. That's ambitious. We have the resources, might as well use them to make a real difference." He glanced down at her. "What do you think?" "I think you're trying to save the world to make up for the years you spent making it worse." "Maybe. Is that bad?" "No, it's human." Elena leaned into him. "And I think it's a good idea. We can start small. Pick one country, build a pilot program, see if it works before expanding. Always the practical one. Someone has to be. You're all grand gestures and impossible dreams. That's why we work. You ground me. I push you to think bigger." They spent the rest of the honeymoon planning, dreaming, building the future in conversations that lasted until dawn. They talked about the kids they might have someday, the programs the foundation could launch, the life they'd build that would honor both where they'd come from and where they were going. On their last night in Greece, lying in bed with Damien half asleep beside her, Elena thought about the scared woman who'd agreed to a fake engagement to save a stranger's life. That woman would barely recognize who she'd become. Stronger, braver, more certain of her own power. That woman had thought love was safe and predictable and easy. Now Elena knew better. Love was terrifying and complicated and worth every moment of fear. Love was running into gunfire because you couldn't stand the thought of living without someone. Love was choosing partnership over safety, truth over comfort, messy reality over perfect fantasy. Love was Damien Valente, former criminal and current businessman, who'd started as a lie and become her whole truth. They flew home a week later, back to the villa and the family and the work that waited. Antonio was walking without the cane now. Julia was already planning family dinners. Marco and Alessia announced they were expecting their first child.
Life moved forward, loud and messy and beautiful. Elena stepped into her role at the foundation with focus and determination. Within a year, they'd expanded to serve 5 cities, with plans for international programs and development. Damien's legitimate businesses grew, providing funding that didn't come with the stain of criminal activity. Slowly, carefully, they rebuilt the Valente name into something associated with philanthropy instead of fear. There were still hard days, moments when Elena missed the simplicity of her old life, when the weight of responsibility felt crushing. Moments when Damien struggled with nightmares about violence he'd been part of and couldn't undo. Moments when they fought about boundaries and priorities, and the 1,000 small conflicts that came with building a life together. But they worked through it, learned each other's triggers and soft spots, figured out how to communicate without walls, discovered that love wasn't about being perfect, but about showing up honestly even when it was hard. 2 years after the wedding, Elena found out she was pregnant. She told Damien over breakfast, no fanfare, just the test sitting on the table between them. He stared at it for a long moment, then looked at her with wonder in his eyes. We're having a baby, apparently. A baby, an actual human child that we'll be responsible for. That's how it works, yes. I don't know how to be a father. My dad was either absent or violent for most of my childhood. I don't have a good model for this. Elena took his hand. Then we figure it out together. Make it up as we go. Decide what kind of parents we want to be and do our best to be that. What if I'm terrible at it? Then you'll be terrible at it and we'll adjust. But I don't think you will be. I think you'll be amazing. How do you know? Because you're amazing at everything you care about. And I know you'll care about this. Their daughter was born on a rainy October morning, small and perfect, and terrifying in the way new life always is. They named her Sophia, after the woman Damien had almost married, because he said that lost engagement had led him to Elena, and he wanted to honor the path that had brought them together. Antonio cried when he held his granddaughter, this man who'd built an empire on violence, reduced to tears by 8 pounds of new possibility. Julia declared Sophia the most beautiful baby ever born and immediately began planning her future wedding. Marco and Alessia, now parents themselves to a son, welcomed their niece with gifts and advice and genuine joy. Watching Damien with their daughter, seeing him gentle and careful and absolutely devoted, Elena fell in love with him all over again. This was the man she'd glimpsed in moments between the danger, tender, protective, capable of softness despite everything that had tried to harden him. Sophia grew into a bright, curious child who asked endless questions and had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. At 3 years old, she started asking about how Mommy and Daddy met, and Elena and Damien exchanged a look across the dinner table. How much do we tell her? Damien asked later, when Sophia was asleep. The truth. Eventually. When she's old enough to understand. Elena settled against his chest on the couch. That we met at a wedding, that it was complicated and scary but led to something good. That sometimes the best things come from difficult beginnings. Leaving out the part about the assassination attempt and gunfights. Obviously, but we'll save that for when she's 30. Or never. Or never, Elena agreed. They built a life that was ordinary in the best ways. Sunday dinners with the family, where Antonio held court and Julia fussed, and Marco's kids ran wild. Date nights when they could get a babysitter. Stolen moments of normalcy between foundation work and business meetings. Vacations to the ocean where Sophia could play in the sand while they pretended the world was simple. The foundation grew beyond Elena's wildest dreams. They serve 15 cities now, with programs in 3 countries touching thousands of lives. Success stories poured in. Kids getting scholarships, families finding stability, communities rebuilding. Every letter, every grateful parent, every child who got an opportunity they wouldn't have had otherwise made everything worth it. On their 5th anniversary, Damien took Elena back to the villa where they'd met. The same terrace, the same view, but everything different now. 5 years, he said, pulling her close, since my mother grabbed a stranger and changed my life. Changed both our lives. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd said no that day? If you'd walked away instead of agreeing to her insane plan? Elena thought about it. The life she would have lived, safe and small and predictable.
The love she never would have found, the purpose she never would have discovered, the person she never would have become. Sometimes, she admitted, but I always come back to the same conclusion, which is that I'm glad I didn't. That saying yes to your mother's desperation was the best decision I ever made, even when it was terrifying. That you were worth the fear. Are worth the fear, Damien corrected. Present tense. Are worth the fear, Elena agreed, though there's significantly less fear now than there used to be. That's what successful legitimacy looks like. They stood together watching the sunset paint the valley gold and red, the same view that had witnessed the beginning of everything. Elena thought about that scared woman in the borrowed dress, agreeing to a fake engagement because someone asked desperately enough. That woman had no idea what she was walking into, what it would cost her and give her and transform her into. That woman would never believe where she'd end up, married to the man she'd pretended to love, running a foundation built from criminal proceeds, raising a daughter in the safest version of a dangerous world. Would never believe she could be this happy, this certain, this completely at peace with choices that had seemed insane at the time. Thank you, Elena said suddenly. For what? For being worth it. For becoming someone I could actually love instead of just pretend to love. For building this life with me. Damien turned her to face him, his hands framing her face the way they had that first real kiss in his apartment. I should be thanking you. You saved my life in more ways than one. Gave me something to live for beyond obligation and legacy. Showed me what love could look like when it was real. We saved each other. Yeah, we did. He kissed her there on the terrace where violence had erupted 5 years ago, where blood had been spilled and lives had changed and everything had started. But the violence was gone now, replaced by something softer, something that had grown in the spaces between fear and trust, between lies and truth, between strangers and soulmates. They went back to their life after that weekend, to Sophia, and the foundation, and family dinners, and all the beautiful, ordinary chaos. Back to the work of building something good from everything that had tried to destroy them. And sometimes, late at night when Sophia was asleep and the city lights spread out below their window, Elena would think about how strange it all was, how a single desperate decision at a stranger's wedding had led to everything she had now, how fear could transform into love, how violence could birth purpose, how the worst situations could somehow produce the best outcomes. She'd learned that life didn't follow neat paths, that sometimes you had to run toward danger to find safety, that love was choosing someone every day, not once in a perfect moment, but constantly through imperfect reality, that families were built as much through choice as through blood, that redemption was possible if you wanted it badly enough and worked for it honestly enough. Most of all, she'd learned that she was capable of more than she'd ever imagined, more bravery, more love, more strength, more forgiveness, more growth. That the woman who'd been scared to take risks could become someone who'd run into gunfire for the people she loved. That the teacher who wanted a quiet life could build an empire of education that changed thousands of lives. Damien would sometimes ask if she missed her old life, and Elena would always say no truthfully, because this life, messy and complicated and hard-won, was hers in a way nothing else had ever been. She'd chosen it with open eyes, fought for it with everything she had, and built it alongside someone who'd done the same. Their story had started with lies at a wedding that became a battlefield. It had been tested by violence and fear and impossible choices. But it had survived all of it, transformed by something neither of them had expected. Real love grown from fake beginnings, genuine partnership born from desperate necessity, honest futures built on foundations of deception. In the end, that was the truth Elena would tell Sophia when she was old enough to hear it. That sometimes the best love stories start in the worst ways. That fear and bravery often look the same from the outside. That the choices you make in moments of desperation can define the rest of your life. That a single scream of warning at a wedding could save lives, end wars, and begin a love that would last forever. That was their story. Imperfect and violent and beautiful and true. And Elena wouldn't change a single moment of it. Not even the beginning.